Chapter 140, Backup. The battle was raging on the Tadramara River. Hesla was responsible for securing the waters. A naval formation was stationed at the estuary, and a huge portion of them were battleships loaded with large-caliber artillery. The German navy was bombarded from a distance of over 10 kilometers away. The cannon's firepower could reach over 10 miles, piercing through the air at high speed, forming a parabola in the night sky. This brought significant damage to the German fleet. The destroyers in the formation launched several homing missiles at the beginning of the battle, but they were intercepted by German fleet's cannon in the air. They were now useless. All they could do was maintain the defense line. The command ship, Scyther, positioned itself in the center of the formation. The enemy is roughly 12 kilometers away from the water mines near the exit of the sea. Don't give the enemy any time to break out of the trap. Scyther's admiral assigned the tasks in a swift and decisive manner. Deer, carp and shark units have been preloaded with torpedoes. Await Germinal's entry and then fire away. Feed them full with a round of firepower. As for the offense formation, maintain the intensity of firepower, no change. Sonar scanners take note of the surrounding waters, there could be a chance for Germinal reinforcements to appear. Inform the Star Dragon's men to release some infantry units whenever necessary. Delay the Germinal Navy's time. Transfer this message to Star Dragon's commander, we need their assault troops to be on standby. On the other side, the troops that were deployed to fight the battle surrounded and harassed the Germinal fleet. Using bombs as their main form of attack, this caused quite some trouble for the Germinal fleet. There were bound to be some lucky cannonballs that escaped their intercepting fire, and when this happened, 3 of their ships sank. As the fleet's main purpose was to evacuate, their weaponry was not sufficient to wage a war. They were not even able to lock onto the high-speed battleships, let alone trying to deal any damage. However, Germinal still had a plan of their own. A fighter jet poured another wave of ammunition, and while the pilot was preparing to make another round, a shroud of dark fog exploded around him all of a sudden. A figure appeared out of thin air. It was a demon with dark eyeshadow and ear studs, with a sharp blade in his hand. He quickly sliced through the pilot's throat, splashing blood upon the window. The fighter jet crashed down in the water with the pilot's corpse. The demon smiled coldly and disappeared, leaving only a dash of black fog. Teleportation ability. Germinal Organization Executive Officer, Renette. Hyla stepped onto the bow of the ship. The wind was blowing through that red hair of hers. She took in a deep breath, raising both her hands as though worshipping the sun. Gray air slowly flowed through from the fresh dead bodies in the battlefield. It gathered from all directions and tingled Hyla's 5 senses. Her face flushed as if she had breathed in God's medicine. She closed her eyes and then opened them even wider than before. An invisible sound wave rose from her lungs out to her throat, and she screamed. Ah! It was like a ghost's piercing scream. The eyes of the pilots in the sky burst, their ears bleeding. Their brains were shaken into a state of confusion. The pilots fell one after another like broken kites, crashing onto the ground and water. They were fried into balls of fire. A no-fly zone had formed in the sky, and the fighter jet formation had single-handedly been taken down by Hyla. The remaining fighter jets received orders and hurriedly retreated. This was the horrible threat of military operations. They required people to operate the machines. If the operator was too weak, Hyla's killing threat could disrupt their mind. Aquamarine's technological advancements did not hold much against Hyla's mental disruption skills. Only a few reconnaissance drones continued to track and observe the sky. Renette teleported to Hyla's side, with one hand painfully rubbing his head. His nose was bleeding, and he had a dark, gloomy expression. "Were you trying to kill me as well?" Hyla gave him a cold shoulder, refusing to answer. Renette could only swallow this breath, not daring to provoke her. In the command room, Lin Yu did not really pay much attention to the battle. He looked at his watch and whispered to himself, "It's almost time." The Germinal Organization's infantry had broken through the defense line and was now rapidly approaching their intended destination. Star Dragon's army executed according to plan, they opened the gates to allow water to gush in. They wanted it to be a naval battle. Hyla would take over the confrontation after the infantry units had boarded their ships. These infantry units would just be useless in a naval battle, they would also become a burden. They were reducing their death toll but weakening themselves too. There was a new type of missile up on the destroyer ship that could cruise and split and avoid attempts to intercept it. The very moment Germinal's fleet and their infantry linked up, they would fire, and one round of it would cause major deaths to Germinal's fleet. The Germinal troops would then begin to flee. Division 13's ambush units would then board the ship and slaughter everyone aboard. That was the next step of the plan. However, in reality, things never went according to plan. Accidents were bound to happen. Do-do-do. The piercing sirens upon Hesla's command ship sounded. The radar detected dozens of targets approaching at high speed from underwater. Ghostly torpedo. Where did it come from? It was too late to intercept it. A warship near the seaport exploded, fire spurting everywhere. Hesla's high-ranking officers had been paying close attention to the battle. The naval formations made them extremely furious. Anti-sonar submarines. How did the signal not sound anything at all? How far is the enemy's range? These could only be Germinal submarines. Where did they come from? Could it be that Germinal had planned this all along, to withdraw some troops from Andria? Or was there a secret base on an island nearby? No matter the reason, the enemy had reinforcements, and they now needed to deal with the unexpected situation. Where are our submarines? Hesla's officers roared. They had planned for several submarines in the vicinity as backup and immediately activated them to search for the enemy's submarines. The Navy suffered heavy losses and were busy tending to emergency repairs. They could not proceed with the missile strikes. This caused strategic disruptions, and the situation was getting out of hand. Germinal's fleet took this chance. They changed their formation. The ship sailed to the shore, opened up, and lowered the slats, providing a bridge for the ground troops to cross. The edge of the stern dragged along the shore of the beach. This method came with a huge risk of beaching the ship. Other ships would throw a hook to link the ship. That way, even if the ship became stuck, it could be pulled back to sea anytime. The root of Lin Yu's confidence came from their submarine team. They were reinforcements that Germinal's forces had called for early on. They relied on this ambush, breaking Hesla's blockade and strategic formation. In order to break through Star Dragon's ambush, Booger had lost more than half of the troops, and when this opportunity arose, he immediately ordered the team to speed up and rush toward the barge ship. Star Dragon's assault troops, which were on standby, became anxious. They followed Hesla's plan to launch a round of missiles first before rushing up. If there was no such link, rushing up would simply be equivalent to committing suicide. What shall we do? If they waited any longer and the Germinal organization's forces managed to link up successfully, there would be no more chances. The assault troops were all from Star Dragon's Division 13. They were all specialists and elites. They could hear their superiors' command. It was only one word. Forward. There was no hesitation. The assault teams rushed forward. Germinal's navy fired a round of missiles at once, and the ambush troops forced their way through the gunfire. Fireworks lit up beside. Their comrades fell and exploded, but they remained unfazed. They were fearless. As a soldier, they always followed orders. Even if it was magma in front of them, they would still have to jump in. It was with this steel-like will that Star Dragon stood out from hundreds of countries since the beginning, becoming one of the last 6 winners. Chapter 141, Duel. Wearing his power suit, Zhang Wei stood at the front of the battleship as the barrier. Lambert dealt damage by sniping. This assault boat did not only have Zhang Wei's team of 4 as Lin Yao was not taking part in battle, there were still 10 elite fighters. The battleship surged forward through the waves, surfing through the onslaught of bullets and missiles before it collided into the Germinal ship with a loud bang. The infiltration team jumped aboard and began exchanging blows intensely with the Germinal soldiers. The infiltration team's attack strategy only had 2 goals. The first was to massacre the barge's attack forces and destroy the land vehicles that were on the boat. The second was to take control of the boat. As Hesla's backup troop did not arrive as planned, the infiltration team was not in a good position. They were falling into a difficult battle. The Germinal organization's plans were affected, causing their progress to slow down. The Germinal executive officers set out to counter Star Dragon's infiltration team. Zhang Wei's team was struggling to get the upper hand on the barge. Suddenly, a strong gale came rushing over without warning, like a ghost. The team's internal alarms rang on high alert as they hurried to dodge it. However, they still could not dodge the shock waves of the wind. A strong wave of dizziness overcame them. Clenching their teeth, they looked toward the direction where the enemy was standing. There, they saw Hyla, whom they had once crossed swords before. Hyla had a cold expression. She still remembered she had once fought the Star Dragon soldiers. Last time, she had taken a small loss because of them. Remembering that, her killing intent was more murderous than before. Both of her hands emitted a dim, gray light, as if they were balls of mysterious, sinister energy that could suck them in. Furthermore, it was continuously growing in size. It would be hard to imagine how frightening the next blow could be. Ho Yu had a pained expression on his face as he held up both his guns with the intent to aim. But with a light sneer from Hyla, her voice carried forth an overwhelming psychological suppression from the necromastery ability. As if he had taken a hard blow, Ho Yu staggered backward as his nose spurted blood. Hyla did not even spare him a look as she turned her gaze to Li Yelin. Her killing intent was clear. This was the special female assassin that had used the lightweight mechanical arm. She definitely knew Zero's whereabouts. Li Yelin had a look of steely determination. She pulled out her foldable machete as she lunged toward Hyla fearlessly. As the pugilist in the team, she had to initiate battles. Hopefully I can last the first bout. Li Yelin quietly clenched her jaw. As long as she could hold out till Hyla's next attack, she had confidence that she could close in to restrict Hyla's movements such that she would not have time to release another one of those psychological attacks. Even though Hyla's abilities were strong, she was only using the attack on a superficial level, and every release required build-up to release the skill. Naive. Hyla remained expressionless. Flipping both her palms, she was about to use the highly concentrated necromancer's abilities to shock Lin Yelin into an idiot. However, the next second, a sudden large wave of power surged toward the side of her ribs, causing her to fly off sideways as she collided into the side of an SUV, and her ribs throbbed with pain. Hyla was in so much pain that her face turned ashen. With a deep heave, the necromancer's power on her hand suddenly dissipated. In her shock, she turned to look at the source of the attack. There was a van driving along the shore, staying alongside the boat. From the driver's window seat, a sniper was hinged on the window as a black-gloved palm held onto this deadly weapon with its muzzle releasing thick smoke. Han Xiao cocked the gun, and another smoking bullet was released from the muzzle. He sat in the main driver's seat, and the smart chip system in the van began driving on autopilot. Driving at a constant speed, it drove alongside Germinal's boat. When they reached the valley, he had spotted traces that Star Dragon might let Germinal troops off the hook. So, Han Xiao drove to the lake beforehand, his target to capture the Germinal executive officers. He spotted Hyla in an instant, then he saw Zhang Wei and the others. Slightly taken aback, he did not expect this coincidence. Seeing his former teammate fall into danger, Han Xiao did not say anything else before pulling out Red Falcon and firing. Hyla's defensive air barrier was weakened to a large extent, and its penetration abilities dissipated, turning into momentum that pushed her away. The interface displayed Hyla's abilities. After 1 year, Hyla had leveled up from LV30 to LV40, and Han Xiao was at the same level as her. He could see her stats, and her two strongest stats were Mystic and Intelligence. Her abilities were described as well. Necromancer's power, dictating death and capturing souls. Potential rating, S. Outsiders could only see the description of the ability. Only the master of the ability could see the specific effects and the extent that it was developed. Through her basic knowledge, where she used her genes to develop her ability, more applications for her techniques could be obtained. Even though Hyla's ability potential was high, she was only at LV40 now. Her strength had yet to be completely used to its fullest potential, but Han Xiao did not have any interest in Hyla's battling methods. Hyla's special abilities seemed to lean toward attacking, but actually, it was actually a versatile ability. From Hyla's abilities, he saw several textbook specialties as well. High-speed fusion, Grim Reaper's power is able to heal flesh wounds under regular circumstances, plus 500% health regeneration speed. While using energy, plus 1000%, 2000% health regeneration speed. Vitals immunity, Scent of Death supports your life vitals are immune to critical attacks. Soul disregard, Dictators of Death fear nothing plus 20% resistance to negative effects, plus 30% psychological resistance. Ignore sudden death, death is like the wind, always by your side will not receive any fatal attacks. When health points are lower than 1%, a special status effect will be obtained. Han Xiao was helpless, these abilities made Hyla practically impenetrable. No, it should not be described as impenetrable, but rather like a cockroach that would not die no matter how much one hit it, unless one used an extremely strong attack ability to finish Hyla off. Oh, I forgot, she was even immune to instant death. Forget it, I'm probably better off just taking a nap. Han Xiao shook his head. As expected of the future big boss, the number of her abilities is almost as high as Bennett's. The only difference between the main roles is just luck. Hyla, the hardest person to take on, was the first person he had met, but Jiang Wei's team had fallen into a difficult situation. Since he had the means to help out, he naturally would not stand aside and not lend a helping hand. After all, they had fought together side by side before. Taking advantage of Hyla's distraction, Li Yelin closed in and slashed at her. Hyla, as she staggered back in pain, was infuriated by Han Xiao's sneak attack. Meanwhile, her wound's recovery could be seen by the naked eye. However, her being on the boat meant that she could not take out the sniper on the shore. After all, she did not specialize in speed and could only use a vehicle as a barricade against the sniper. Yet, once Li Yelin, Jiang Wei, and the others found an opening, they instantly engaged in battle with her, forcing Hyla to move out of position, exposing her to Han Xiao's sniping view. Even though they did not know who the sniper on the shore was, they knew that he was evidently there to help. So, Jiang Wei's team took the initiative to launch a cooperative attack. This strategy was very effective. Hyla's movements were instantly restricted, and with the sniper's uncanny ability to find openings, he managed to stop her from counter-attacking at the right moment every time. This synchronized perfectly with Li Yelin, Jiang Wei, and the others' movements. Hyla realized that she had actually fallen into a situation where she could not retaliate at all. Thus, she could only stay on the defensive, dodging every attack. But from Jiang Wei and the others' perspective, it was a ray of light for them. Originally, the team of 4 had created a battle strategy. But after Hou Yu received heavy injuries, it rendered him unable to fight and left a hole in their teamwork. But that sniper was able to patch up that gap. At every critical moment, he managed to fire a timely shot to assist them. It was as if he was someone who had a solid grasp of their fighting style. Who was he? Li Yelin and Jiang Wei began to have such thoughts. Hou Yu, who was still suffering from dizzy spells, could only fend off regular soldiers. Watching Jiang Wei and the others coordinate with the sniper, he suddenly felt as if that sniper was actually a real team member of theirs, and it was he who was only an outsider. Hyla is held up. Lin Yu furrowed his eyebrows. Looking toward the van at the shore, he squinted. Black Phantom. What is he doing here? Chapter 142, Teleportation is a double-edged sword. Division 13's trump card. Booger's face was solemn, and he no longer cared about Han Xiao. He was locked onto the middle-aged man. Both were powerful martial artists, and as their eyes met, it was as though a bomb just exploded. Both of them were fuming, and their fists collided like two streaks of transverse lightning striking the sky. The scene seemed to freeze while the sky roared. Ripples could be seen on the surface of the river. What a chill. Martial artists specialized on controlling their own spirit, and it specialized on training body energy. Division 13 had played their trump card. Lin Yu had no choice but to send out Uger, who was at the same rank, to fight back. Exasperated, he ordered, Renette, go get rid of that Black Phantom. Easy, Renette uttered. As an assassin with a teleportation ability, Renette believed he was the nemesis of all snipers, even if it was Black Phantom. With a snap of his fingers, the tired Black Phantom would be gone from this world. Renette had always seen himself as an artist. The next second, black mist flashed, and Renette was nowhere to be seen. All of a sudden, he appeared in the driver's seat of the truck and was going to stab the sword through Han Xiao's head. Teleportation. Han Xiao was alert and immediately activated the full-body electromagnetic armor. However, the sword was unable to reach even his armor. Frenzied Sword had reacted quickly. He had rushed to block the sword for Han Xiao and died on the spot. Both were taken aback. Eyes filled with bloodlust, Han Xiao reacted within seconds. He grabbed Renette by his hand using one arm while he activated the thermoelectrical incisor gloves on his other hand. Amid the buzzing of the electricity, he slapped the gloves onto Renette's face, and immediately, a burning smell filled the air. AHH. The shrill scream was ear-piercing. Renette was in crazy pain, and he teleported straight back to the ship. As he tried to move his arm, he realized that Han Xiao was grabbing onto his arm. Han Xiao was also brought onto the barge. Han Xiao moaned angrily and just would not let go of Renette's face. With his 5 fingers penetrating Renette's skull, the damage dealt was increasing at the speed of waterfall. The pain was so unbearable that Renette let out painful beastly cry, and his expression changed. Han Xiao abruptly raised his other hand and gave him a violent slap. The strength of that slap was over 50 points and instantaneously smashed Renette's brain into a charred lump of meat. You've killed Renette, LV46. You've gained 60,000 EXP. Target was 6 levels higher than you. Energy expended, 82%. You've gained additional 49,200 EXP. Second advancement. Progress, 2/3. Han Xiao panted, trying to catch his breath. Teleportation is indeed powerful but can be weak too. He is suitable to be an assassin, but he thought my weakness was close-range attacks. Teleportation was not a bad ability. If the superhuman was careful enough, they could be unbeatable. In fact, there were small differences in various teleportation abilities. For instance, when one teleported, could another be brought along as well? How big was the range? Was it within visible range, or was it anywhere one could think of? What kind of teleportation was this? Was it imagination, or was it the recombination of matter? Was the energy consumption constant, or did it depend on the distance traveled? Was it purely just traveling from place to place, or could it be aggressive too? It was all in the details. These were the death-causing reasons. In the past, he had encountered other characters capable of teleportation, such as a guy with recombination of matter type of teleportation ability. Once he crashed into a battleship's ionizing shield, he would instantly dissociate into powder. One with the imagination type of teleportation ability would teleport all over the galaxy and ended up overexerting his energy and become weak. Renette's teleportation seemed to be a mix between imagination and recombination of matter. When he grabbed hold of another person's body, the other party would also teleport together. This belonged to contact type of teleportation and could be dangerous once one was trapped in it. His sniping seemed to be the reason that led to Renette's death. This was also an idea that Han Xiao liked to mislead the others. When assassins thought that close-range attacks could kill him, it usually led to their own death. This disguise instantly tricked one teleporter. If it was a normal battle, Han Xiao knew that he would be helpless against Renette. Han Xiao stood up and finally understood the situation he was in. First, he got brought onto the ship by Renette, and then Germinal troops were all around him, with their weapons all pointing at him and preventing his escape. Completely surrounded. Han Xiao's eyes froze as he covered his chest with his hands. Fire! Endless bullets drowned Han Xiao. All of a sudden, with Han Xiao in the center, a strong invisible force was released. Enemies and vehicles within the range of 20 meters all flew out and fell into the river. This area became empty. Han Xiao was the only person left behind. His chest was not covered by the electromagnetic armor, revealing a palm-size big precise device tied to his chest. The device was creaking, and slowly, it became softer, eventually coming to a stop. Field repulsive machine. Type, extraordinary machine. Quality, green. Energy capacity, 110/150, requires charging. Effective range, 20 m. Effect, releases a strong repulsive field and pushes away any objects within the range. Cooldown time, 6 minutes. Remarks, get lost. After experimenting for 2 months, Han Xiao had obtained a variety of blueprints and had already started to suit himself up. Han Xiao pulled out his 2 third-generation Berserk Eagles, activated his electromagnetic hover boots, and jumped onto another ship. Since I am here, I might as well kill some people. With Renette's blood on his body, Han Xiao started his killing on the barge. The Berserk Eagles had bullets coming out of them non-stop, and because the recoil was too strong, he was unable to move his wrist. The bullets penetrated through every single Germinal soldier, either through their chest or head shot, leaving the floor full of corpses. It was just like a dark movie, whereby no one could stop him. Soon enough, he arrived on the ship with Li Yelin. Han Xiao's willful action soon caught the attention of everyone. Lin Yu was furious. Renette, that idiot, did not just get himself killed but had even brought the monster onto the ship. Their ship was about to leave the estuary, and yet he still made such a mess. Quickly, get rid of that black phantom. Lin Yu demanded. As their commander, he could not attack easily. If he did, there would be no one left to observe the battle. Hyla had long discovered Han Xiao, and she was already full of anger. She clapped her hands and created a mental shock to deter Li Yelin and the others. She took a deep breath and gathered all the power of the corpses, turned, and screamed at Han Xiao. She used all the gathered power on Han Xiao, and the air rippled like a sound wave. This was like an exploding bomb in the brain. A sudden pain hit Han Xiao. It felt as though someone was using a spoon to stir all around his brain. The sky in his side seemed to be tilted as he lost control of his body and stumbled to one side. Feeling nauseous, the veins on Han Xiao's temple seemed to jump vigorously as if they were going to explode. You have suffered 211 mental damage. You are in a dizzy state. With my intelligence characteristic providing me with a mental defense, I still suffered 200 plus damage. If I did not have low-level strengthened life, I could have lost almost 1/5 of my HP. On a technologically advanced new planet, Hyla's combat strength was scary. Bearing the pin-pricking pain in his head, Han Xiao whipped out a grey grenade from his waist and threw it out. His accuracy was compromised, and the grenade landed 10 meters away from Hyla. Hyla thought that this was the side effect from him being dizzy and did not pay attention to it. She decided to return with a more impactful one, but out of the blue, the grenade detonated. There was no flame nor shrapnel, only an ear-piercing high-pitched sound that rushed directly into her eardrums. Hyla's brain started hurting, and she felt the world was turning, too. You can make people dizzy, so can I. Han Xiao gnashed his teeth. Burst grenade, uses high-frequency sound to disrupt the eardrum. Range, 50 m. Effects, causes one to feel dizzy. Magnitude of affects determined by endurance. Chapter 143, I will recognize you even if you turn into ash. Stunning enemies was a tactic commonly used by psychics. Their strong willpower resistance was their strength. However, burst grenades would cause a sense of dizziness at a physiological level because it caused ear fluid imbalances. Therefore, despite the strong willpower resistance psychics possessed, endurance was key in this case. That was the biggest weakness of all psychics, leaving them defenseless. Hyla immediately suffered damage from the attack. Agony was all over her face as she stumbled from one side to another like a wave. No matter who Hyla was, during a battle, she only had one identity enemy. Han Xiao knew no mercy and continued shooting coldly. The bullets landed all over Hyla's body. Eventually, when the bullets ran out, he set the electromagnetic hover boots to the highest power, and before Hyla could retaliate, he kicked Hyla. She flew up into the air, knocked onto the railing, and finally fell into the river. The river was stained with blood as Hyla's body sank. Han Xiao did not believe that Hyla would die so easily, and there was no news on the interface. He expected that after all these attacks, Hyla would be able to recover soon enough, but there was no need to worry for the moment. This enemy is so difficult to kill, I can't just tackle her right now. As this thought flashed through his head, Han Xiao then had time to think about Li Yelin, a teammate from the past, who was now looking at him with shock. Black Phantom? Jiang Wei asked carefully. He could not help but feel a sense of familiarity. Jiang Wei did not seem to not recognize him, and that was great. Thinking about the feud between the Germinal organization and Zero, it was best if he continued hiding his identity. Han Xiao's eyes sparkled and heard Li Yelin suddenly yelling, Han Xiao! Han Xiao! Who is that? I think you've got the wrong person. It's you. Stop pretending. I could recognize you even if you turned into ash. Li Yelin gnashed her teeth. Damn, how did she recognize me? Based on my polished acting skills, how could I still be exposed? Han Xiao was dumbfounded. This young lady is really unpredictable. Members of the troops were stunned. They were doubtful about Li Yelin's judgment, but at the same time, they were a little convinced. At that moment, Han Xiao, who was in full black, holding berserk eagles in both hands, suddenly revealed his own face. Oh, that's what you actually look like, Jiang Wei murmured as he finally understood why Han Xiao had always worn a mask in the past. In the past, when they were working together for Division 13, Han Xiao had always worn a mask. Members of the troops never saw what he looked like and never knew Han Xiao's true identity. At the moment, they thought that the face they saw on the facial simulator was Han Xiao's actual face. They had expected him to be quite handsome. No one expected that the famous Black Phantom would turn out to be a former comrade. Everyone was puzzled, had he been that strong in the past? Why didn't he show that, And why did he want to leave Star Dragon to become an assassin? The higher UPS seemed to have acquiesced, too. Wait, he became the Black Phantom of the Darknet organization, and the higher UPS were so ambivalent about it. Was this actually a secret mission? You got it wrong. No time for nonsense now, the enemies are here. Han Xiao said sternly. Li Yalan raged. It's no use even if you deny. Right? The higher-ups must have sent him for a secret mission, that's why he cannot reveal his identity. Could it be that Star Dragon is going after the Darknet next? The crowd was unknowingly forming a misunderstanding about the situation. The conversation ended quickly. On the battlefield, everyone could only suppress their doubts and focus on dealing with the enemies. It was a fierce battle between Star Dragon's commando squad and Germinal organization's troops. Superhumans were found all over the battlefield, launching attacks with their powers. A symphony of cries of agony and gunshots played through the battle. A Germinal executive headed straight for Han Xiao. Han Xiao pointed toward the executive with his hands forming a pistol and signaled to the Star Dragon team to join forces against the enemy. Jiang Wei and his team naturally had no objection and started fighting by his side. As the Germinal executive rushed over, his body suddenly swelled up like a balloon and transformed into a 4-meter-tall white beast. The white beast started running on the deck like a wolf, and his heavy body caused the deck to vibrate. He opened his big mouth and pounced over. This action was full of elegance and strength. Transfiguration was a common branch from the Esper family. They could take different forms, some weaker, and others stronger. The forms they took on could be so strange that they could even be out of the imagination. It was said to be related to evolution and various gene mutations. Some would transform into an alien creature while some would transform into wild beasts. This Esper branch appeared most commonly on planets that were magic-based. This trait could be passed down through blood inheritance or be acquired through training. Science and magic formed different civilizations, and there were differences in the understanding of certain things. In addition, their methods of experimentation could be different, too, and each had its own unique points in terms of advancement. The great white wolf hopped around the deck as it tried to attack. Han Xiao, Jiang Wei, and 2 others joined forces to try to take down the wolf. Han Xiao felt it was no one of his business. He allowed Jiang Wei and his power suit to act as the tank while Han Xiao stood at the side and tried to launch some sneak attacks. Sometimes he would use his thermoelectrical incisor gloves to slice a piece of meat off the wolf. Ho Yao also used his berserk eagles, and his action was swift as the coursing river. Initially, he was proud of himself. After witnessing how skillful and minimalistic Han Xiao was and how he would never miss a single bullet, Ho Yao felt like he was making a fool of himself. You really live up to your name, Mr. Black Phantom. Such dexterity in handling double guns, Ho Yao admired secretly. He had joined Jiang Wei's team mainly because he had received the orders from the high-ups, and he had never heard of Jiang Wei's team being unable to produce good results. To his surprise, the extraordinary Black Phantom had actually been part of this team in the past. The great white wolf was beaten up badly. Realizing that it was beyond its ability to retaliate and other executives were unable to help, it turned and fled the scene. Han Xiao had already expected this, and right then, he fired his berserk eagles at the great white wolf's eyes, activating the flaming will. This time, the damage was increased by 3.2 times. Boom! The great white wolf's eyes exploded, and it groaned in pain as it fell onto the deck. The whole barge shook for a second. Jiang Wei immediately dealt another blow. With his ammunition emptied, Jiang Wei's armor extended into a golden sword. He leapt as his exoskeleton provided him with the energy and latched onto the great white wolf's body as he slashed it violently many times. The others came forward to help and eventually killed the great white wolf together. Just then, the backup troops finally arrived at the port and let off a signal flare to signal for them to retreat. At that moment, Jiang Wei turned and asked Han Xiao, Han Black Phantom, do you want to leave with us? No, thanks. Han Xiao waved his hand. All right, thanks for your help, I'll remember this. Star Dragon will also remember this. Jiang Wei's speech had a hidden meaning. Together with his troops, he turned and leapt onto the assault boat. Lin Yalan stared in Han Xiao's direction. As members of the Division 13 were withdrawing, Han Xiao activated his electromagnetic skating shoes and jumped onto the shore. He rushed for the truck that had been following him around automatically, jumped into the driver's seat, switched it to manual driving, and left the shore speedily. Hyla, who was wet through and through, climbed onto the ship. Fighting off her dizziness, she glared at the departing truck. She was always the one treating people like that, but this time around, she had actually had a taste of her own medicine. Black Phantom, I will remember you. Hyla's eyes froze as her body healed quickly. The Germinal troops arrived at the port and released a torpedo, causing the sea mines to explode. With the water exploding, they successfully entered the open sea. Hesla's navy also came by and was not reconciled to not giving chase. Both ships were restricted by each other. In the midst of the firing the cannons, the Germinal ship sank. Based on the battle strategies, the Germinal's forces broke free from the attacks and escaped. However, based on the damages suffered from the battle, Germinal lost 70% of their troops while Hesla's losses were less than 10% of what Germinal had lost. With that being said, victory was definitely not Germinal's. Although they had not been able to stop all the Germinal forces, both nations were able to achieve the battle objective of damaging the enemy. All in all, the winners of the battle were Stardragon and Hesla. Through the window, Han Xiao glanced at the sea. As the destruction from the sea battle slowly went out of sight, he shook his head. The battle is over. Han Xiao glanced at Frenzied Sword, who seemed to have revived and was sitting beside him, and wrote him a mission with no requirements. Frenzied Sword had taken a stab for him, and thus, he would give him some EXP even if he did not need to. The description of the mission was actually the reward for taking a stab for Han Xiao, and that made Frenzied Sword surprised. His action was purely voluntarily as he thought it was okay for him to die but Han Xiao must not. He did not expect any reward, and he became even more determined to protect Han Xiao. After giving the reward, Han Xiao turned to his own interface and grinned from ear to ear. Second advancement. Progress, 3/3. The great white wolf that he had fought against with Zhang Wei was a LV-45 character. As it was a joint battle, the additional EXP obtained was little. However, the requirement for advancement could be said to have been completed, which meant I can advance. Chapter 144, Reward and Impact. Han Xiao was right in the middle of a battlefield. He decided that it was not an appropriate time for his advancement. I should get out of this battlefield first. He decided to look through other information first, such as the results from Tadramara River battle. His final evaluation was AB. He had 450,000 EXP on hand, which was far more than what he had expected, and he had millions of EXP accumulated on his interface as well. Fall of the Germinal. The progress of that level A mission had increased by 2%, and the improvement for automated destruction was even better. The evacuating Germinal troops had been a large force made up of many different troops from different settlements. Therefore, when Stardragon and Hesla crippled the evacuees, he also took a share. The total gain had reached 21%. This meant that he had completed the requirements of this quest. The southern continent could not offer him any further improvements. He could go to the western continent and the northern continent next to anticipate a large battle like this again. Then he could earn more EXP. After that, he would have to go to Germinal's home base on Andria mainland. There would still be more gains he could reap in the future. So, Han Xiao would not cease fall of the Germinal so quickly. Since the minimum standard was 20% and he had already completed the task, it gave him some confidence. This meant he could try and get a higher rating the next time around since he was no longer in a hurry to complete the task. Based on his experience, the ratings from A-level missions would be higher. The reward was special this time around and not limited to experience, skills, expertise, talent points, special equipment, or even direct rewards of attribute points. Han Xiao arrived at the location where the Darknet helicopter was stationed. The driver was on standby as he moved the useful machinery up onto the helicopter. He then blew up the truck without leaving a single trace behind. The truck had cost him a sum of money, but since he had an abundance of funds, he did not feel the pinch at all. As the saying goes, it is easy to enter the luxury lifestyle when you're poor, but it is way more difficult to go back to a pauper kind of lifestyle when you're rich. Han Xiao was very fortunate to step on the wealthy path. The market was huge, and he need not worry about money anymore. Everyone says that a man turns bad when he becomes rich, and that is so true. Han Xiao mumbled as he smoked a few cigarettes before getting onto the helicopter, instructing the pilot to take off. The wind from the rotors was strong, forcing Han Xiao to squint. Waves raged on the dark sea surface, and the smell of blood filled the air. Breaking away from their pursuers, the Germinal fleet sailed in the boundless sea. They turned on anti-detection to prevent themselves from being discovered by the satellites. There were many satellites orbiting Aquamarine, and many were from the previous civilization who had fallen. These satellites had been taken in by the Six Nations, but some of them had fallen into the hands of other forces. Some became public satellites for some hackers, and others became space junk. Each ship had been charred by explosions, and the repairmen were busy fixing them, riveting the steel plates and repairing the damaged mechanical components one by one. The rest of the personnel were cleaning the deck and washing away the bloodstains. Breaking through the blockade made them suffer heavy losses, including the lives of 17 executives. Han Xiao alone had killed 3. When Lin Yu was reporting back to the commander, he emphasized on these statistics. Black Phantom's intervention surprised the commander. It turned quickly into anger as the commander started to feel like the Germinal organization had seemed to turn into a tiger without teeth. Anyone dared to bully it? At the same time, it also increased his hatred for Zero. He had disrupted the plan that they had laid out laboriously and also put the entire organization in grave danger. The commander remembered his conversation with Zero before he escaped from the lab. It angered him more whenever he thought of how this traitor managed to fulfill his promise. The commander then made people add Black Phantom to the watch list as he had no energy to focus on a small assassin at the moment. The main problem on the commander's mind was the next step of the plan for the organization. All the sub-bases of 3 continents had been evacuated. Now that they had lost the ability to be proactive, the Six Nations had no more reservations, and it was likely that they would seize this opportunity to start the war. The commander did not wish to see this happen as it would bring about critical damage to the organization. He needed time for the Germinal organization to recuperate. They had to eliminate Zero, who could see into the future. Germinal had been in Andria mainland for a long time, and if the Six Nations were to start a war with them, there was no other choice but to leave the mainland and fight from the sea. Release the intercontinental nuclear bomb. Not to mention that there are civilians living on Andria mainland, Germinal also had anti-missile facilities. If they were forced to their wits' end, they could just set the nuclear bomb off and destroy the world, mutually assured destruction. Of course, that would be his last choice. He could not keep that as a trump card. Even if he were to use this as a threat, the Six Nations would never allow Germinal to continue to grow. Maybe Red Maple, Ordina, and Hesla would come to a compromise at different stages and start to launch sneak attacks behind the scene, but the rash fool from Theseus and the madman from Raylan would not hold themselves back. They would likely reject any form of compromise and would only launch more aggressive counterattacks. They were not afraid to get destroyed together with Germinal if it had to be. In the original plot, the 4 continents were the battlefields for the Six Nations. The secret sub-bases bound the Six Nations and affected the war to a huge extent. Only by having luck on their side, would they have been able to break the stalemate. When the war got fierce, Germinal troops suffered many defeats and were hugely crippled. As there were not many armed forces left of Germinal, some politicians in the Six Nations perceived their goals to be reached and were voting to compromise. From their perspective, the goal of destroying Germinal had been achieved, and the Six Nations had suffered losses too. They had chosen to allow the Germinal organization to stay on Andria mainland. After all, that was a place where no one wanted to be. Although it was impossible to remove the roots, it could prevent their resurgence. Any hindrance to the Six Nations had been removed. The Germinal organization had lost their powerful threats to the Six Nations, such as killing of civilians and destroying cities. Only the Andria mainland base camp was left for them, and the Six Nations could combine their powers into one, making the situation for Germinal worse than it already was. The most urgent task at the moment was to divert the attention of the Six Nations, not allowing them to have time and resources to start the war. The commander gave this thought some thinking again, but he could not think of better ideas. Commander, Base 13 has something urgent to report. It is regarding a recent successful test subject from the genetic improvement plan. This is the observation record. An assistant handed him a report. The moment the commander heard the words test subject, he felt a headache. He was stunned when he looked at the report. The assistant then said, cases like this did not just happen on one person. As you can see on the following list, this phenomenon seems to have occurred on a large scale, and it is spreading like an infectious disease. The commander stayed quiet for a while, looking as if he was digesting the information. He then made a sneer under the mask. There are weird phenomena, but it seems like luck is on our side. The Six Nations will have to start worrying now. In a room on the boat, the light was dim and kept blinking. Hyla took off her black combat uniform and faced the mirror to count the number of wounds on her body. The most obvious one was a bullet at the side of her rib, and the dark blood clot that had formed was terrifying. Hyla was expressionless as she rubbed the wound to reveal her tender flesh. She looked at the mirror and remembered how her skin used to be smooth and fair with barely any scars. Unlike now, she had so many marks of serious injuries on her body. Hyla lowered her eyelids, and her long lashes covered her eyes. She put on her clothes again and went out to stare at the sea silently. She had to live and wait for the next battle. Jiang Wei and his team took the plane back to Division 13. Other than Jiang Wei, who had to write the report, the rest of the team closed their eyes as they were overwhelmed with fatigue from the battle. Say, how did Han Xiao become Black Phantom? Li Yelin suddenly opened her eyes with a confused look. What, Brother Xiao is Black Phantom? Lin Yao was taken aback as he had not been involved in the battle and did not know about this matter. Jiang Wei then explained the story to him. Lin Yao was flabbergasted and could not help but ask, you couldn't have recognized the wrong person, right? I could recognize him even if he turned into ash. Lin Yelin coldly laughed with confidence. Are we not going to look for him and bring him back? He was embarrassed when he left. He must be on a secret mission. I will ask the higher-ups when I report to them, Jiang Wei said as he shook his head. Lin Yelin could not help but add, do help me ask when he is intending to repay me as well. Jiang Wei was lost for words. Little Lin Lin, you do not seem to be hurt? Disusu, who was in the same plane, came over. Li Yelin's face suddenly slammed down as she turned her head, ignoring her. Disusu was not bothered. She pushed the shy Lin Yao aside and sat down beside Li Yelin. With a playful smile, she moved closer to Li Yelin. She then moved further away hurriedly as if Disusu was the source of a virus. Disusu loved Li Yelin's face of discomfort. She laughed, turning her eyes away, and asked, are you guys talking about Black Phantom? I met him once in the past and heard he took part in the war as well. Chapter 145, The Road to Boss. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Li Yelin's eyes lit up. She was very certain that Black Phantom was Han Xiao. Curious about what happened to him after he left Division 13, she looked past her annoyance with Disusu and asked her eagerly, what was he doing when you met him? At that time, his code name was still Mr. Black, a Scorpion-level assassin, who was involved in a defense mission in Seagull City with the leader of the Dark Net. Li Yelin pumped her intently for more information. Have you heard anything else? Disusu raised her eyebrows. Why are you so concerned? I'm curious about him, Li Yelin explained. She felt that there must have been a deeper reason for Han Xiao becoming Black Phantom. He would not have exposed his identity easily. Curious? Oh no, that would usually be the first step to the beginning of a love story. We must kill that possibility in its cradle. Disusu's eyes froze but her smile remained. She said slowly, oh, I got some information about Black Phantom from a female assassin with codename Golden Fox. 5 minutes later, the listening crowd was staring with glazed eyes, trying their best to process the huge amount of information. Lin Yao trembled with fear. At some point in time, Lambert stopped wiping his blade. Lin Yelin mumbled under her breath, no wonder he had no physical urge when he was touching me. Hou Yu swallowed dryly and told himself that he would hide away if Han Xiao ever returned to the team. When you meet him next time, be careful. Disusu chuckled, got up, and sashayed away, leaving the group staring at one another. Jiang Wei coughed. He is our teammate after all. Don't discriminate against him. Everyone nodded hesitantly in agreement. Jiang Wei coughed again as he continued to write the report. However, the news was unsettling. He could not ease his mind to focus fully on his report but pushed on nonetheless. As soon as he was done, he got up to look for his commanding officer. After submitting his report, he requested to speak to the secretary. After a few minutes of waiting, his request was approved, and the video communication was put through. The bald head image of the director of the Secret Service appeared on the screen. Jiang Wei went straight to the point and said, we saw Han Xiao. The director of the Secret Service was surprised. Since the last tip-off, Han Xiao seemed to have vanished from the face of Earth. He could not be contacted no matter how they tried. Although Division 13 had stopped their search for Han Xiao, they were still very curious about his whereabouts. The director of the Secret Service said in a serious tone, go on. Jiang Wei phrased himself carefully and explained how they had discovered that Black Phantom was Han Xiao. The director of the Secret Service had initially thought that Jiang Wei had seen Han Xiao with his own eyes. Little did he know that it was only a speculation without hard evidence. He stared blankly for a moment before he muffled a chuckle and replied, "You must have confused the two people. How could Black Phantom be Han Xiao? One was a super assassin in the Darknet organization with an extraordinary level of combat capability. Although Han Xiao had demonstrated his capability previously, he was far weaker than Black Phantom. This guess was just too far off the mark." The director of the Secret Service was really amused. He almost blurted out that Han Xiao was Zero, but he stopped himself. The Bureau had tight confidentiality rules that prevented him from disclosing Zero's identity to others. Even though Han Xiao's whereabouts were highly erratic and unpredictable and the Germinal organization was greatly undermined, hence there was probably not much of a need to conceal Han Xiao's identity. Rules were rules. After all, Han Xiao had been known as a field agent all this while. Concealing his identity could reduce the risk and lessen the trouble. Even though the Germinal organization knew that Zero was liaising with Star Dragon, they had not been able to find Zero all this while. Thus, the director thought there was no need to let Jiang Wei in on this information. Jiang Wei had never seen Han Xiao's real appearance, so he could not have found out that Han Xiao's true identity was Zero. Regarding Han Xiao's real identity, he cannot be Black Phantom. Jiang Wei stared blankly. He thought, perhaps, that this was a hidden message from the secretary, for him to stop being nosy about this issue. So, Han Xiao was most likely sent out by the higher UPS on a special mission, which would explain why he needed to conceal his identity. "I understand," Jiang Wei replied with a knowing nod. The secretary was puzzled. "What do you understand?" "Strange." Star Dragon's Division 13 sorted out all the reports and intelligence information and handed the final document to the 7-seat committee. The committee held a meeting to sort out all the important issues that needed to be discussed, and finally, there was only the issue regarding Black Phantom left on the table. All 6 knew Black Phantom's reputation on the Darknet. The discussion was more focused on how they should treat Black Phantom. He offered a helping hand, but it could have been at the Darknet's request or because of his own personal decision. An elder knocked on the tabletop and said slowly, "The Darknet came to us previously. They are going to start the shelter program, so they are requesting our aid. So, this should be a friendly gesture from them." The members nodded in agreement. The Darknet had always remained a neutral party. If this was a sign that they are leaning toward the 6 nations, it would definitely be a good turn of events. The 7-member committee quickly concluded that it would support the Darknet's shelter program and approved their request for material aid. This was their opportunity to return the favor and win them over. After the meeting was over, Gu Hui and Elder Gao pushed open the heavy door of the conference room and walked down the quiet empty corridor side by side, discussing a separate issue in a hushed voice. "Have you gotten any other news about Han Xiao? He has not been seen ever since he gave us some intelligence 2 months back." Gu Hui shook his head. Han Xiao was the person who provided the information. Division 13 was eager to get in contact with him again, but he was not picking up the calls nor answering any messages. As if he had vanished off the face of the earth, he was completely off the grid. No one was aware of his whereabouts or his plans. Gu Hui's heart sank as he recalled Han's scrupulous nature. Please don't be wreaking havoc again. As for Jiang Wei's speculation, Gu Hui had only heard from the director of the Secret Service who briefly mentioned it. Without any real evidence, he would not be too bothered. How could Black Phantom be Han Xiao? His looks and combat capability were just not comparable. Jiang Wei did not know Han Xiao's real identity, so he was blindly guessing, but Gu Hui was aware that Han Xiao was Zero. Their intel was asymmetric, that was probably why it caused a misunderstanding. Information was updated on the Darknet, and some of the information regarding the Battle of Tadramara River was circulated out. Most people were worried about the volatility of the situation, as if the dark clouds of war were looming on the horizon once again. The information contained news of Black Phantom's involvement in the fight. Many forces were very concerned regarding the actions of the super assassin. It was apparent that Black Phantom was an extraordinarily powerful mechanic. There were quite a number of powerful espers and pugilists, but mechanics with high combat capability were rare. Black Phantom should be added to that short list of powerful mechanics. He still made a high-profile move. Bennett sighed with profound resignation and sipped his herbal potion that was meant to suppress his wounds. Out of the blue, Wang Yuan received a call. His face lit up with joy and exclaimed, "Star Dragon has promised material aid." Bennett was surprised. That was not a small sum, but Star Dragon had agreed to it so readily. He asked, "What did they say?" "Well, they said they are very grateful for our help." Bennett frowned in puzzlement. "Help? What did we do?" On second thought, Bennett realized that Star Dragon must have thought that they had sent Black Phantom. Black Phantom was seen as a representative of the Blood Pack Society, and his actions were inevitably labeled as representing the Darknet organization. Bennett was at a loss, not knowing whether to cry or to laugh. Black Phantom had unintentionally done him a favor. He would definitely not clarify this wonderful misunderstanding. "Well, I guess I owe him a favor then." "Oh, what did Hesla say?" Wang Yuan pushed his black frame spectacles. With a flash of contempt in his eyes, he snorted, "They are still pushing away the responsibility." Bennett shook his head. He had long known Hesla's way of doing things, and only Star Dragon was easier to talk to. If he really wanted to dig out some material aid from the 5 other stingy nations, it would not be without some long, tedious negotiation. With Star Dragon's assistance, the initial resources are more or less enough. Let's start the shelter program as soon as possible. The war will break out any time now. The sooner it is implemented, the more people we can shelter. Sleepy Winter and his group finally completed the Camp Destroyer series mission Battle of the Tijramara River. Their evaluation was naturally low, but because it was a super-level mission, the EXP they had gotten was considerable. They should have been very happy with the results, but whenever the 3 of them recalled Frenzied Sword's performance, they immediately felt that the reward from the mission was just too meager. Comparison always made it worse. The feeling of being far behind someone just felt horrible, not to mention that they had in fact started out at the same time. Rainy Kim was rather calm, but Sleepy Winter and Twinkle Fried Rice were really fed up. Thinking about it again and again, Sleepy Winter finally sent a chat request to Frenzied Sword. "Frenzied Sword. Sleepy Winter, why are you looking for me?" Frenzied Sword asked in a humble voice. "I just wanted to ask, did you trigger a secret quest?" "We saw you on the battlefield," Sleepy Winter sent out the video message. "Oh, you guys were there too, huh?" Frenzied Sword was surprised. "Why does this tone feel so annoying?" Sleepy Winter coughed dryly and chatted half-heartedly before asking about Black Phantom. The video showed Black Phantom in action. Sleepy Winter was well aware that Black Phantom was an advanced figure who had been seen around Bighorn Village, and he was very curious about how Frenzied Sword came to know him. Frenzied Sword kept beating around the bush and refused to talk about the main topic. Sleepy Winter knew that he was unwilling to share information about the secret quest, and he could only bid farewell and hang up the communication sullenly. "Did he say anything?" asked Twinkle Fried Rice. No, Sleepy Winter shook his head. He was in fact a little envious of Frenzied Sword, but he knew secret quests was something that came with luck. Then, an idea came to his mind. "Why don't we try speaking to Black Phantom?" The sky was turning bright near the horizon. It was dawn. At Han Xiao's request, the helicopter landed on a hilltop in the wilderness. Han Xiao asked the pilot to stand by, and stepping off the plane, he took a deep breath. The fresh air invigorated him. After flying through the night away from the Tijramara River, he was getting ready for his advancement when Frenzied Sword dropped offline. A player going offline is akin to disappearing. That gave the pilot a shock. Seeing that Han Xiao's expression had remained unchanged, he suppressed his shock. Different players had different peculiarities. Although the world had all kinds of espers that made everyone well accustomed to abnormalities, over time, more and more people would realize the peculiar nature of the players' community, and there would definitely be some interesting developments. Han Xiao could not wait to see this happening. Then he could validate some of his guesses. Putting aside these thoughts, Han Xiao focused his attention on the interface. The requirements for advancement had been met, so a level up would mean an advancement. He looked at the EXP that he had accumulated over the past 2 months. Minus the EXP that he had used up for skills improvement and integration of blueprints, he still had a full 6.1 million EXP left. Finally, a second advancement. Han Xiao was secretly leaping in joy. His progress had been as fast as a rocket, especially since he had gotten a huge channel to reap EXP after the players appeared. After this advancement, he would officially become the top figure on Aquamarine, and this was only the beginning. This meant that he could set foot in areas that he had previously found to be too dangerous, to acquire those rare abilities and skills. Quests that could trigger dangerous situations, abilities, skills, and equipment, all that would have a huge impact on his combat capability. He was already halfway there to becoming someone like Bennett and Hyla, who could take on boss-level quests with their template abilities. Advancement. Han Xiao entered his EXP. Mechanic, Trainee, level up LV5. Plus 50 energy, plus 1 dexterity, plus 1 endurance, plus 4 intelligence. Attained 3 points unassigned stat points. Attained 1 talent point. You have completed your second advancement. Endurance and health points ratio increased to 1 to 20. Chapter 146, skyrocketed. After the advancement, Han Xiao's health point conversion ratio increased from 115 to 120. It was obvious to him that his body was stronger. He could feel a ball of energy down in his abdomen, invigorating him. This second advancement did not unlock as many skills as his first advancement did. His first advancement had felt like a complete rebirth, while this second advancement was way smoother a process than his first one. Though not explicit as a description on the interface, Han Xiao noticed that his perception had become more acute. The world was more vivid in his eyes. If he had to describe how the advancement felt, it would be natural. He could feel the breeze flowing around his limbs and smell the mix of particles in the air. His senses were amplified by several notches. The second advancement was a prerequisite to unlock many skills, and of course, the most obvious benefit was that he could upgrade to LV60. He had plenty of EXP on his interface, so he need not stay at his current level to accumulate EXP. He could first take Night Stalker, which was at LV.6, to its highest level. This would bring him a total of 30 dexterity, 20 strength, 10 mystic, as well as 10 talent points and 20 unassigned stats points. Han Xiao then assigned his EXP to Mechanic, Trainee, a main class with an upper limit of LV.15. As he progressed, it took more and more EXP for a level up. He had used up a significant amount of EXP to level it up from LV.5 to LV.10. His level skyrocketed by tens of level and rose directly to LV50. As his energy exceeded 1000 points and reached energy level 6, Han Xiao received additional milestone rewards. Plus 6 STR, plus 8 Dex, plus 6 Endurance, plus 10 Intel, plus 400 Max Stamina, plus 8% Machinery Quality, plus 8% Production Speed, Energy Stats strengthened. As one's energy level grew higher, the bonus addition became more significant. Leveling up to LV6 was a significant milestone. He could receive a new bonus addition of Energy Stats strengthened that made the benefits of his attributes more prominent. To a mechanic, energy with magnetic properties could be used for producing and utilizing machinery. He could increase the speed, improve the quality, and amplify the power more easily. The actual effect would be far more useful than the numbers on the interface looked. Mechanics were not like pugilists or espers who would require huge amount of energy. In the beginning, additional energy might not be very useful to mechanics, but once he had the ability to utilize his energy in this manner, his strength as a mechanic would be more apparent. Mechanic, Trainee, reached LV10. To level up further, Han Xiao would need 800,000 EXP. Han Xiao had around 1,300,000 EXP left on his interface. He decided to save half of it as a backup to integrate blueprints and upgrade other skills. In the last 2 months, he had occasionally upgraded some important skills, such as Sniper, Moving Snipe, Continuous Gliding Shots. Not forgetting his blueprints, his core magnetically controlled retractable armor was already at LV5. He was already donning on a new set of armor where his stats were strengthened. He had also upgraded blueprints like Ranger Robot, low-level Smart Chip. These blueprints were the ones that were relatively useful. Han Xiao took a look at the skill list and entered his EXP into Flaming Will and Fine Intensive Modification. These two skills had better value for EXP. After his EXP dropped to half of its initial level, Han Xiao stopped the upgrading process. These two skills were each upgraded by 2 or 3 levels. He had accumulated 38 unassigned stat points, and he threw all of them into his intelligence stat. That was the crude yet simple manner in which mechanics upgraded themselves. After all this was done, his combat effectiveness soared. Without even relying on his equipment, his energy rank reached the standard of 12,000 ONA. Level, 50. Attributes, 69 STR, 94 dex, 82 endurance, 200 intel, 11 mystery, 6 charm, 1 luck. Health, 2970. Energy, 1230 LV6. Power level, 1213 ONA. Grade, D. Take care your equipment. You can be a boss level figure on this planet if you work hard. Han Xiao was very satisfied with the growth in his strength. Intelligence had become his strongest stat. It had reached 200 points. He could be way more productive when he utilized his machinery now. With the speed at which he was gaining EXP, he would rise to LV60 in a very short period of time. This was the upper limit for a second advancement. He was at the top among the version 1.0 players. My combat capability now, combined with my mechanical equipment, means that I am among the top few fighters in Aquamarine. Even at LV50, my stats are very strong. That is partly because of my expertise and partly because my main vocation is at a high level. This means I can take care of most superhumans without too much difficulty. I can count on my machinery to help me win, but my expertise and skills are too limited. I'm just too far off from someone like Bennett. Han Xiao had been busy harvesting EXP from players, and he would continue doing so, accumulating EXP and gaining exposure to increase his popularity. He would be traveling to the novice villages beyond Andria to teach the novice players basic skills first, and after that, he could proceed to teaching the energy forging technique. Through this, he would accumulate a great deal of EXP. With this, he was confident that he would be able to invest in rare skills and abilities very soon. 2 months' worth of EXP was just wiped out in an instant. It would not have been so easy if he was still his old self. He would have wanted to level up the moment he had gotten some EXP. Now, Han Xiao was not too worried about how he could get more of it. Players, they were the biggest market. Energy forging technique was his trump card. Once he let the news out, it would trigger a frenzy. In fact, any player that had been through their first advancement would eventually awaken this skill. But most players are unaware of this. As long as he imparted the skill to a player below LV20, he would be able to harvest a huge amount of EXP. But there was a condition: he needed to raise his profile so that more players could get to know him. There are 2 ways. I could take the initiative to find players or create opportunities for players to find me. Han Xiao stroked his stubble and was deep in thought. If he chose to look for players proactively, it would be a trip like his recent trip to Bighorn Village. Other than the novice grounds beyond Andria mainland, he could go to the southern continent, the western continent, and the northern continent to harvest some EXP. It did not seem like he had much of an opportunity to get players to come to him on their own. He could release more tasks after his advancement, but it was still a drop in the ocean if he looked at the entire player community. There was no way he could attract all the players. He had made a good start at Bighorn Village. Quite a number of players thought that Black Phantom could trigger secret quests. But that was far from getting enough players to come to him. He needed a more concrete plan. After the battle, the Germinal organization had withdrawn its forces from the 3 continents and gone into hiding. For the time being, the global situation would remain stable. At the very least, there would be no public declaration of war for some time. The tide had changed. Germinal would not declare war. However, on a second thought, the power had now come to the hands of the 6 nations. It might just bring the imminent war to an earlier date. This was not his original intention. Resigning to his fate, he could only shake his head. Nonetheless, the situation was not too bad. If the 6 nations went ahead to start a war and destroyed the Germinal organization, it would not bring any harm to him. With this thought in mind, Han Xiao was relieved. After all, he was not an egotistical person. He had never felt like he could control everyone. What he had always wanted to do was to make full use of his extraordinary foresight to reap benefits from the power struggles between the different forces. Even though the situation had deviated from its original track, war was still not avoidable. Han Xiao could not help but sigh. He was powerless as an individual to try to revert the situation. Instead, he was embroiled into the maelstrom. However, precisely because he was whirled into the situation, he could seize opportunities that came his way. This was really energizing for Han Xiao. For any player to reach LV20, they will take roughly 2 months. But now, 2 months is just nice for me to run a trip to all the novice villages, Han Xiao thought to himself with a smirk. Having hammered out his next plan of action, Han Xiao began to think about another issue: his own strength. After his advancement, he was able to move closer to the upper limit of version 1.0. Of course, there was no real upper limit for him. He was more concerned about his combat capability. Ranks were only a part of his combat capabilities. His capabilities would be more dependent on his skills, expertise, and mechanical equipment. It went without saying that mechanics were more dependent on their equipment than other classes. Han Xiao was using his sniper without a hitch. Naturally, he did not want to give up on his sniper. However, he felt that it was time to develop a second combat style to deal with the increasingly complex situations that he would be going into. Chapter 147, Inspiration for Lightweight Mecha. Mechanics were known for having a wide range of tactics. Just like how saints would never fall for the same trick again, mechanics would never rely on a single set of tactics. To develop new tactics, one would only need to develop new tactics centered around a core gadget, just like how the core of Lurker Sniper Flow was the sniper itself. Using additional tools like electromagnetic skating shoes, special ammunition, stealth ability, and so on could further strengthen one's prowess. To a mechanic, developing a new battle tactic was a challenging yet fun task. Brainstorming on new ideas and then being able to bring it to life enabled one to achieve a sense of fulfillment, just like role-playing games. I have quite a few choices: rovers, portable batteries, self-created mechas. However, the rovers' attributes and intelligence are weak on their own, and besides, due to their large sizes, they cannot be easily carried around. Moreover, even if the only model is placed into the robot troop, the outcome will still be unsatisfactory. They are way too expensive. As for the battery, even though there is a portable in the name, the pedestal disc is still too large. If I cannot assemble it within seconds, I can't use it with the flamethrower style. Perhaps, I can only use it as a trap ambush. There's also the self-created mechas. Han Xiao had a lot of blueprints that he could use for the armor suit, such as K600 endoskeleton, smart chip, exoskeleton limbs, electromagnetic hover boots, basic storage cube, and other modules. In addition, he had acquired all the basic knowledges, including bioengineering, mechanical dynamics, assembly, and energetics. He had already fulfilled the criteria for creating his own armor. This was not a bad idea. However, some problems might still arise. For instance, to equip the mecha, he would first need a support vehicle that could repair and replenish the materials. Prolonged battling could weaken the attack power, just like a problem every guy would face. Besides, he did not want to run around wearing a tin can, and it would be best if he could fly. He did actually develop a jetpack, but it still needed some adjustments. When activated, the jetpack would fly away without the pilot. If the jetpack was secured tightly, one could experience what 100 times the speed of a Ferris wheel would feel like. Han Xiao did not want to try that for the second time, and as such, apart from the small drone, none of his other machines had a flying ability. Medium-scale and large-scale mechas required advanced knowledge of heavy machine modification, and he was only capable of modifying light mechas. Nanomuscle suits were more classic but required advanced knowledge of miniature machine modification. Suddenly, Han Xiao had a eureka moment and came up with a new idea. Almost made a grave mistake. Actually, I do not need armor as my tactic core. I can start from the assisting type of light armor, neglecting the firepower and focusing on my personal attributes. He had an idea. As he recalled the armor he had used or seen before, he thought that basic light armor looked reliable and would be easy to replicate one. As for robots and turrets, he decided to give up on them since they were inconvenient to bring around, and it was impossible to always bring along a truck. Even with airdrop support, there must be a transport aircraft, and then there was the money. No planes could fly in a country's airspace. Even Fabian Company's planes, which had licenses, had to follow a fixed route, and they were not allowed to fly wherever they liked. It would be alright to fly into the wild, but there would not be stable supply stations in the vicinity, and it would be difficult for airdrops. As the night faded away, the golden glow of the sun reappeared, turning the sky from pitch black to a light blue. Han Xiao stretched his neck, and from his collarbones came a cracking sound. He was re-energized and full of enthusiasm, ready for the fresh day. He felt like he could puncture the sky with just one punch. Of course, that was just an illusion due to his overflowing energy. His senses, after becoming stronger, were also sharper. Han Xiao felt his vision, hearing, and sense of smell had all improved. As such, he was even able to see the details on the rough surface of a tree trunk from afar. Han Xiao boarded the helicopter and ordered the pilot to take flight. Han Xiao traveled on Darknet's helicopter and finally arrived at another new village on the southern continent after landing several times in between to refill the fuel. This village was also a place where vagrant warlords gathered, and it was called Green Valleyville. There was a total of 19 beginner towns for new players on planet Aquamarine, 5 in the southern continent, 4 in the western continent, 4 in the northern continent, and 6 on Andrea mainland. Green Valleyville was a land controlled by the vagrant warlords and belonged to the Alumera family. Alumera, a well-known vagrant warlord force with family-style management, were headquartered on the southern continent. They also had a land on the north continent. In addition, they were in partnership with Theseus. The chief in command was called Daryl Alumera. Anyone with the same last name would be his immediate family member. His other top commanders were all strong players that he had been headhunted to join him, like second leader Xiaojian, third leader Bai Qi, and so on. The force was formed by surviving members of various extinct states, and hence, they were a diverse people. The vagrant warlords called themselves different names, including family, group, financial group, general, and so on. They believed that if they formed groups, they were less likely to be bullied or threatened. When the force eventually became stronger, Alumera took control of the military and became an authority in the wild. Many vagrant warlords chose to join them, as after all, the Aquamarine Wild was not a safe place for most. All Han Xiao wanted now was to continue searching for players and earning experience through them. Time was limited, hence, he did not stop after the battles but immediately proceed to new villages to search for players. There were 3 scenarios when players went online and offline or respawn. The first was same spot respawn. This required some explanation. When one went offline while being on a moving vehicle, then when one respawned, one would not respawn back at the same location, but one would be respawned back onto the same vehicle. For example, if one was traveling in space, but the location one respawned at was not on the spaceship, then that would be crazy. The second scenario was respawning at the nearest city. That only applied to respawning players and not for those that were logged in. This meant that if one was killed, one would earn a chance to travel to a city for free, and it was either the city that one wanted or the city that one did not want. The third scenario was binding to a certain respawn location. However, this required special conditions, including affiliation to camps, special items, or through agreements with NPCs. For example, when one joined a secret camp, one could bind to the camp and select it as one's respawn point, but others would not be able to do so. Frenzied Sword would come online on the helicopter. As such, Han Xiao had left a phone behind and instructed the pilot to wait. He then trudged through the forest, heading for the Green Valleyville. After 2 hours, the outline of the Green Valleyville could be seen from a distance away. It was situated at the side of the forest on a flat land. It was fortified and surrounded by barbed wire fence, and there were vagrant warlords patrolling around. As expected, all the players were gathering at the camps outside of the settlement, just like in Bighorn Village. Han Xiao did not bother to hide himself. The sentry of the Green Valleyville spotted him from far away and reported right away to the person in charge, Balsas. Balsas was a bald black man, neither tall nor strong. Instead, he was tiny and thin. He had a pair of triangular eyes that seemed gloomy. Upon hearing what the sentry had described, he was shaken. Sounds a little like Black Phantom. Balsas took out his computer and searched for Black Phantom's photo. Upon getting confirmation from the sentry, Balsas' expression changed. Didn't he just interfere with the battle at Tadramara River? Why is he here? I have nothing to do with him. Just the name Black Phantom alone made Balsas anxious. Even though Green Valleyville was heavily armed, he still felt unsafe. Balsas then muttered, should we approach him and find out why he is here? Since Alumera did not have a previous relationships with the Black Phantom, Balsas thought that it would be impossible to clash with the Black Phantom, and there was also no one who had published a wanted notice on Black Phantom on the dark net. Balsas calmed down and called for an assistant. He ordered his assistant to take his place and approach the Black Phantom as he was afraid to do it himself. When the assistant headed out of the gate and walked toward Black Phantom, Balsas moved beside the big gate and observed through the barbed wire fence. He seemed really careful. However, Balsas very soon witnessed a scene that shook him. He saw that the villagers living outside were actually excited and friendly toward the Black Phantom, actually gathering around him. Balsas was surprised. How do all the villagers know about the Black Phantom? There were fewer players at Green Valleyville compared to the number of players at Bighorn Village. When Han Xiao arrived at the players' camp, he was warmly welcomed by everyone. It was so crowded, and everyone surrounded him, obstructing his route. Through the forum, the incident at Bighorn Village had spread across Aquamarine players, and all other new player villages were envious that new players at Bighorn Village had a chance to switch their vocation. With the unexpected appearance of Black Phantom, all the new players from Green Valleyville were thrilled. Black Phantom is here. We are going to be lucky too. A player with the ID Bun Hit Dog was more exhilarated than the others. He was quite a well-known video game graphic designer, and his XX Adventures series, which was humor-based and full of content, had gained him a lot of fans. Chapter 148, The Wind Rises. Bun Hit Dog saw Galaxy as a potential television series. As there was limited information online about it, he keenly realized the hidden potential and decided to create a series that introduced and explained Galaxy. Moreover, he himself really liked Galaxy as well. It was inevitable for many to start a series on a popular game. Normally, as long as the content was interesting, the first person that produced the television series would easily gain popularity through the game. Wandering around a new player village, Bun Hit Dog had yet to find the starting point for his series. The first episode of a series was the most important, and he did not wish to do it carelessly. It would be great if he could obtain some exclusive information that ordinary players could not get easily. Han Xiao's appearance made Bun Hit Dog feel like his chance was finally here. Since the Black Phantom was a hot topic on the forums, many people would be drawn to his television series if his first episode was about the Black Phantom. Who was not curious about this mysterious high-level character? He would then be able to ride on Black Phantom's popularity and make the series a successful one. Bun Hit Dog, who was among the crowd, switched on his video function, panned toward Black Phantom, and started recording. He then added his own explanation and comments into the footage afterward. Players were clustering toward him due to the event that happened at Bighorn Village, and that helped save Han Xiao some time. Han Xiao thought he might as well not sell any items. After all, he did not bring any with him. Instead, he went straight to releasing the list of skills that he could teach. The only request was to give 5 reputation points, which meant, wish to change your vocation? Give me some money. Black Phantom isn't selling anything? Then how am I supposed to increase my reputation? This. Giving him free money. Players were stunned and whispers started among the crowd. Han Xiao was calm and thought he did not want to go through so much trouble in Bighorn Village, since the players all knew that they could advance through him. His offer seemed like he was trying to scam the players, but in reality, it was just a simple deal, 2,500 Aquamarine dollars in exchange for a chance for advancement. Deal or no deal, it was all up to them to decide. Compared to the normal route for obtaining basic knowledges, paying 2,500 Aquamarine dollars was already considered a cheap price. At the time, Bals's assistant approached and nervously swallowed his saliva. He was trembling with fear every time he took a step closer, and he was afraid of getting too close to Han Xiao. What is it? Han Xian glanced at him. Cough cough, may I know why you are here at Green Valleyville? The assistant asked as he braced himself. Han Xiao took a puff of his cigarette and said, I'm just walking past here. Don't worry, I'm not here to cause any trouble. The assistant heaved a sigh of relief and said, oh, Alumera welcomes you, and Balsas wishes to invite you into the city so that he can give you a treat. No, thanks, I'll just stay here. Han Xiao declined as it would be inconvenient to communicate with the players once he entered the town. Since there would not be anyone who dared refuse him, he would leave once he had gotten the experience. As such, he did not pay attention to Balsas. All right, the assistant left hurriedly as his heart raced, and he was dripping with cold sweat. The legendary killer seemed to be emitting a scary aura. The assistant was scared stiff even though Han Xiao was just standing still. Especially his eyes, they were like those of hungry wolverines wandering around a dark forest. One could get goosebumps just by staring into Han Xiao's eyes. This was one of the effects of having universal reputation. When dealing with certain forces, there might be additional effects. When the assistant returned into the village, Balsas asked, what did he say? The assistant then repeated everything that had happened. Just passing by. Balsas frowned and pondered. He suspected that there were some secrets going on between Black Phantom and the refugees outside the village. After contemplating for a while, he ordered, "Get someone to observe Black Phantom and report to me if anything is weird. Also, go get some information from the refugees outside. I think Black Phantom is here for them." On the other hand, all the players had witnessed the conversation between Han Xiao and Balsa's assistant. A question then arose among the crowd. Everyone was able to detect and know the name of Black Phantom because they had sensors in place, but why would the Balsa's assistant know of him too? Could it be that Black Phantom was a very popular character on the planet? The players were all still trying to figure out the structure, background, and the power balances on Aquamarine. They were only able to get a glimpse or two of the world through the maps, which was not helpful at all. Everyone was suddenly curious about Black Phantom's background. Exploring the story of the planet and being able to participate in it was one of the joys of this game. Bunhit Dog focused on recording the full situation. Hiding his excitement, his instincts told him that this was definitely the best video material. Exclusive information and the identity of Black Phantom could be used as the prelude to the background of this planet. While Han Xiao was getting a windfall in Green Valleyville, the world's situation was quietly changing. Star Dragon, Hesla, Red Maple, Ordina, Theseus, and Raylan, the Six Nations wipe-out operation against the Germinal organization had ended, and the subsequent impact was gradually emerging. The Six Nations had only held 3 conferences so far. The first was held after the war in the past, when the Six Nations were first formed and the lands were first claimed. The second conference was held 2 months after the war. The pollution from the war was affecting living conditions. Since it was a problem regarding the whole planet, all the nations came together to try to come out with a solution. The third time was 5 years after the war, whereby the security and defense issues posed by the vagrant warlords were discussed. The last 6 ruling nations on Aquamarine did not have a close relationship with one another. If it was not for a worldwide issue, they would never have worked together. Today, the 4th Six Nations Conference was held. The topic was about the next step in their plans regarding Germinal and whether they should go to war or not. The conference was done in the format of a conference call, and the leaders from each of the 6 nations joined in. In a meeting room in Star Dragon Tower, the metal door was locked, and the leader of Star Dragon was sitting at the desk. On the other side was a big screen where the other 5 leaders could be seen. The corner of the conference room was filled with people. All of them were the elders from the military, and Gu Hui was also among them. The conference had already been going on for 2 hours. So, has everyone decided? Ordina's leader was emotionless in his tone, and no one was able to tell his stand. The leader of Theseus stood up confidently and said, "I, Raylan, and Star Dragon have all agreed to send out our troops." Hesla and Red Maple object. Ordina pondered for 2 seconds. "I give up my vote." Everyone looked as if they had expected it. Gu Hui, who was standing by the side, remained calm. There were 2 that agreed, 2 that objected, and 1 that gave up. He had already expected such results. Theos and Raylan were the toughest while Star Dragon had a strong grudge with Germinal, so they would definitely not miss this chance. Hesla and Red Maple were unwilling to waste money on war. It seemed that Ordina was the greatest slime ball, always thinking about other things instead. The 6 leaders discussed for another hour and finalized their direction. They all decided that the final decision was to be determined by the military forces of each nation. The screen turned black. The 3-hour meeting had officially ended. The elders who were listening by the side seemed shocked. During the conference, it was decided that the 6 nations would conduct a large-scale military operation similar to the previous major war that had uprooted the political balance. The 6 nations would move forward and retreat together, attack the Andria mainland from 6 directions, and finally destroy the Germinal organization completely. War is coming. Chapter 149, Galaxy Times, 1. The players in Green Valleyville took a screenshot and showed off the arrival of Black Phantom on the forum, which sparked another round of heated discussions. Previously, it was Bighorn Village, now, it is Green Valleyville. Will he move on to a new location? Is this high-ranking character arranged by the game developer? The times at which he appears feels weird. If he was a mechanic instructor, his whereabouts would be uncertain. Unless he is the planet protagonist who manages the information written on the net. It doesn't seem like it. I think the planet protagonist and the plot should be related. It is unlikely that we could come in contact so early. Black Phantom should be another type of mysterious character. Since it is difficult to switch vocation, could it be that Black Phantom was sent by the game developers to compensate us? What? Does it mean that in order to switch our vocation, we have to do it now or else we'll miss this opportunity with Black Phantom? The speculation regarding Han Xiao had not stopped, and the commotion in Bighorn Village had not subsided. His popularity had once again been pushed all the way to the top by the players in Green Valleyville. Han Xiao read up countless posts about himself with great interest and summed up the impressions that most players had of him. The first kind, some players thought he was a mysterious businessman who would appear in the early stages to provide benefits to the novices. The second kind, some thought he was a mechanic instructor. The third kind, they thought he was an important character who was in charge of handling important tasks. Due to this statement, Han Xiao had to handle a group of players who wished to trigger hidden tasks every day. After reading about Maple Moon's example, some players thought that by showing hostility to Germinal, they could exploit the hidden quest. As the statements made by these people were very strange, Han Xiao rejected all of them. However, there were still players who thought they were highly charismatic and chose to explore any backhanded ways to convince Black Phantom. Since there were more female players, the leader of Sky Territory had a post saying that that would be a benefit when they talked to Black Phantom. Han Xiao was then surrounded by female players who were trying to charm him. Yet he remained indifferent. You think that just because you have looks, you don't have to pay? Dream on. However, some players were very arrogant and even tried to attack him. Han Xiao adopted the responsibility to right them of their baseless arrogance. He would kill any of these players once they resurrected to teach them a lesson. The game would only refresh the number of deaths every 6 days. This resurrection could also be called anti-addiction mechanism, and players who dared attack him would be forced to go offline. These kinds of lawless players obviously played more standalone games. Unlike other players who were more cautious in progressing in the game, they were risk-takers. No one took pity with these players. This game had been released globally, and there would definitely be a rare madman who wanted to challenge the entire game world. They were used to it. One player after another queued to pass Han Xiao their money, and Han Xiao realized the mechanics department had attracted quite a number of players. However, as there was a request for the gifts to be sent directly this time round, some petty players were rather hesitant. As a result, the queue was also rather sparse. Han Xiao just went with it and browsed through the forum at one side. Suddenly, a new post caught his attention. The topic was Galaxy Times. The column is released. Han Xiao's face changed as he felt the nostalgia. Galaxy Times was a sub-column, and the content varied. The column talked about the news on Galaxy, including all kinds of anecdotes, stories from professional players, and analysis of the game process. Han Xiao had once been a follower of Galaxy Times, and he would always have the urge to be the first to watch it. Now that he himself had joined the game, he was unsure if the content would have changed. In the video, a male and a female host were sitting in front of the camera, like a news broadcast. Behind them was the scene of Galaxy, showing the background of the new planets. "Hello players," the male host greeted, "this is Galaxy Times, dedicated to sharing first-hand game information. Your gaming career is our top priority. The public beta has been going on for 10 days, and the players' enthusiasm has not changed a bit," the female host said. "Now let us first review what has happened in the past 10 days. The first issue of the Galaxy Times was informative, and the next 10 minutes was a quick review of the beta players during the 10 days, introducing the various planets and the civilization background. Among them, there was a planet with an ancient civilization, where players were mostly wearing armor, carrying swords, spears, and hammers as weapons. Their background looked like a mix of Chinese and Western medieval times. It was obvious this planet was dominated by martial arts and magic. If there was a need to add a subtitle to the plot, it should be World Hegemony and I will use your skull as a bowl. There was also a highly modern planet called Planet Brighton. The city was like a floating island with 99 towers scattered on the edge of the city, forming a defense, and the main tower in the city center. The large crystal ball at the top of the tower provided magical power to suspend the city. Occasionally, there would be sightings of a dragon across the sky. New players would have a slim chance of survival in this world as it was very easy to hit the death limit. Of course, there was an even more difficult way to start, and that would be Planet Winterfrost. The base of the Hell Demon military troop was also the only one where players could see the Galaxy starships. Hell Demon military troop starships were crazy powerful, and this planet was a mix of magic and technology. the troops themselves had powerful combat power. They could also ride the cosmic creatures into space for a short while, and their level was high. Fortunately, Planet Winterfrost was just a sub-base camp for the troop. Otherwise, the American players who chose Planet Winterfrost as the base camp would not even be able to get out of the novice village. The richer the resources were for the novice planet, the more challenging it would be at the beginning. In contrast, the difficulty of Aquamarine was moderate, and the technological background was similar to that of many years ago. Unlike other planets where even trash cans on the street could incite the player's curiosity, there were not many surprises on Aquamarine. However, the popularity of Aquamarine on the forums was rising, and the main reason was the appearance of Black Phantom. He was the first high-ranking character to interact with the players. The two hosts then turned around and talked about the Black Phantom. Next, we'll talk about an incident that happened in Aquamarine, and friends who have been active on the forum all know that Black Phantom is the first mysterious high-ranking character to appear in front of the players. The players do not have much information about him. Chiu, what role do you think he plays in the plot of Aquamarine? The male host asked. Based on the current information, Black Phantom seems to have a high position, and his identity is extremely mysterious as well. Furthermore, he and Germinal are enemies. Oh, does this mean he's on the same side as the Six Nations? I am not sure. Perhaps only the developers can answer this question. Alright, after listening to this lame joke, let us return to the topic, the male host said. Speaking of the Black Phantom, he seems to be a mechanic instructor and can expose hidden plots. The latest news suggests that Black Phantom has appeared in Green Valleyville of Aquamarine. Therefore, friends who wish to transfer to the mechanic class should seize the opportunity. The Black Phantom is by far the easiest way to obtain the knowledge. However, there has been a different opinion on the forums recently. Some players who transferred to the mechanics department are starting to regret. The female host feigned her surprise. There is such a thing. There was a quarrel at this point, and most of the players had been simply choosing their vocation based on which vocation was the strongest. After they had switched to being a mechanic, they found out that mechanics were not up to their expectations and would naturally be full of complaints. Before the topic came to an end with the two hosts, Han Xiao looked at the responses and saw one response at the top. The ID was called Luzman. Chapter 150, 2. I am a beta player in Bighorn Village. A few days ago I changed my vocation to mechanics with Black Phantom. Initially, I thought this is a very strong class, but after switching, I realized that being a mechanic is totally different from what I had expected. The skills are trashy and the equipment are easily damaged, but I could only repair them after I have bought the materials. My gun just died like this. I'm so mad. The combat power is rather weak too. One public beta test player who was 4 levels lower than me came up for a challenge. He didn't even have a main vocation, and his sub-vocation was a mere hunter. We fought for 11 rounds, and yet I didn't win any of them at all. For a main vocation to lose to a sub-vocation, while being 4 levels higher, this mechanic vocation is just a pile of shit. I was fooled by that video of Black Phantom. Damn, I was scammed. Those senior NPCs always have NPC templates as bonuses. Black Spirit is not even a player. His combat power doesn't even have much of a tingle. This mechanic vocation is so weak in its early stages. Maybe it would be as strong as Black Phantom's eventually, but you will be starting way behind others from the beginning. It takes even longer to reach the same level as the rest. What's more, the mechanic vocation relies on machineries, and the materials used to make the machinery costs a lot of money. This class is perfect for the local tyrants. If you don't have money, don't even try. This mechanic vocation has no future. Seems like I cannot use this account anymore. I can only restart another account and retrain. What a trash vocation. Luzman's response was full of resentment. He had even uploaded videos of him losing in battles. Many people had echoed him in the comments, pushing his post to the top of the responses. After glancing through other posts, Han Xiao realized that most of the posts had traces of Luzman. That guy copied and pasted the comments so many times. Many others found his resentment to be over the top and they argued with Luzman on the forum too. Han Xiao narrowed his eyes. This was not totally unexpected. The players would realize sooner or later that the mechanic vocation is not suitable for combat in the early stages. Luzman was the first one and he would not be the last. These grievous people only fell for the trap because they were attracted by his video and had simply chose whichever vocation that was strong. The moment they realized that it wasn't what they had imagined, they would feel deceived and angry. There were also players who liked the mechanic vocation who ignored these useless arguments and complaints. Some players were in the game for entertainment while others wanted to be the strongest in the game. Luzman was clearly one of the latter. These negative comments would definitely affect his business, and since there was only one chance to choose a main vocation, players would become more cautious, especially first-time players. Han Xiao shook his head. He had wanted to attract more players into the pit of mechanic vocation to expand his market. Seems like I have to reaffirm players in the value of the mechanic vocation. I can't just rely on displaying my strength. The program continued running. Off the script, the male MC said, "We have just received the unreleased promo clip on the next version of the game from Galaxy. Do take a look." The screen began to play another video. Just as what had announced, this promo video focused on the battle scenes of each vocation. The heavy armored knight appeared full of energy. The tip of his gun emitted smoke, and it hit a group of iron-shielded guards. The crash was loud like a thunder, and bodies were flying all over. A tribe with horns controlled the elements around them. Flames slithered and wrapped around their body like a snake. A magician stood in his cloak, and a web of light appeared beneath his feet as he chanted. Light rays of magic shone out from his fingers. The bald-headed sorcerer used his mind to manipulate objects around him. He released an invisible strike his opponents around him, causing them to fall one by one with their noses bleeding. The clips were all very realistic. It was gorgeous. This was only a demo of the promotional clip. Nothing was finalized. The clips were recorded by new players from every planet, and there were only a few clips from senior players for the time being. They barely got together the battle scenes of the 5 main vocations. The battle scene for mechanic vocation was a clip of Black Phantom in action. Han Xiao was the first advanced player to demonstrate his combat power. There were several clips showing the jaw-dropping scene at Bighorn Village, as well as scenes of the interception battle at Tadramara River. Sniper, rifles, turrets, squadrons, and even the vicious Fury Blade was featured in the clip. The players was all engrossed in the scenes. They were all exhilarating moments. I didn't know I got selected to be in the promotional video. Han Xiao was a little surprised. He still remembered last season's promotional video. The scene for the mechanic vocation was just the process to produce a machinery, and most players assumed that it was more of a support role. Hence, only a few players switched to the mechanic vocation. According to the first version, the proportion of players in the mechanic vocation was only 9.7%. This promotional video alone attracted tons of interest from the players. Mechanic vocation wouldn't be as bleak as before. He wasn't afraid to risk players complaining and regretting on the forum in exchange for attracting more players over. This promotional video also improved his popularity, and this was much more effective than word of mouth. Han Xiao was overjoyed. He expected his fame to shoot up in no time. The next lineup on the program was about professional players. The male MC said, "Within 10 days of public beta, tons of famous esports clubs have shifted to the game, and according to statistics, Esper is currently the most popular one. This class is a lucky draw. If you get a high-level skill, it is equal to 10 million lottery tickets. The future is unlimited." It is known that the United States, South Korea, France, Japan, and Switzerland all have accounts with A-class potential rating, and the various big clubs have offered prices for these accounts, worth millions of US dollars. The screen flashed wildly. Almost $1 million US to buy a novice account. It was simply a lottery. Good luck would mean making a fortune immediately. Flashing news: the American Devil Club, Sandstorm Club, France Tulip Club, and the Korean 4-Star Club have already bought the accounts. They will be used by the club's elite players. And the God-level players will still be using their own accounts. American elite player King and Queen has changed to the magician vocation and was rewarded with a rare skill through a hidden quest. French elite player Lost Angel has chosen to start at random and he seems to have obtained an opportunity. South Korea. Foreign esports players all seem to be performing very well. China's esports scene wasn't weak either, but only a few managed to hit the top spots. Champions of many events had long been occupied by players from the United States, France, Japan, and South Korea. If you could win a championship, local players would celebrate as though it was a festival. They would be bringing honor to their country. Local players are performing rather well. A player by the name of Fenyu completed the reward pool quest on her own, gaining over hundreds of thousands of experience points, becoming the biggest winner. It is extremely beneficial for her future development. Who knows, maybe the advantages would come snowballing in. This task was related to Black Phantom. A dark horse by the ID of Fury Blade was among the professional players. During a meeting at Zhongcheng Club where Fury Blade was at yesterday, they had released a video. It was the battle scene in the promotional clip with Black Phantom, and I believe everyone had also noticed Fury Blade. He seemed to have triggered Black Phantom's hidden quest. The clip of Fury Blade was sent in by Luminous Moon. In order to raise their profile, the club had used it for publicity, just when the Chinese professional players were feeling down about their lack of outstanding performances. This brought Fury Blade lots of attention. This would be the end of this week's content. We look forward to seeing you next time. The following are details for the lucky draw. During this episode, how many times was Black Phantom mentioned? Please drop a message to the official account. We will draw 10 people. Han Xiao couldn't stop laughing. He then switched off the screen. Han Xiao's name came up the most in the entire show. The audience had the perception that everything good had some kind of correlation to Black Phantom. Black Phantom equals opportunity. Han Xiao didn't expect that his name to appear on the screen so many times. His plan had some good returns. His popularity rose yet again. And more importantly, after the program was broadcasted, more players would come aboard to change their vocation, allowing him to earn more experience points. He did a rough estimate. Based on this trend, the number of mechanic players on Aquamarine would likely be 2 or 3 levels higher than previously. Chapter 151, A Small-Scale Beast Attack. There were some wild beasts spotted around the Green Valleyville, and they had been causing problems for the town. Before Han Xiao came, Balsas had used some small sums as a bounty to incentivize the refugees to hunt down the beasts. Slowly, he had noticed something strange. The refugees would be able to hunt down the wild beasts without any casualties. After some observation, he found out to his surprise that these refugees seemed to have revival espers and would never really die. Balsas was shocked. It might have been normal for one person to have the revival esper ability, but it would be a different story for an entire group. Could it be that this ability could be spread, just like the werewolf tribe in myths, where one saliva carried the mutated genes and could turn a normal person into another of their kind in one bite? After some observation, Balsas was excited to find out that the refugees were easily satisfied by small incentives. If I can get these strange refugees to work for me, their revival trait will make for a formidable army. I won't have to fear anyone from Black Pine anymore. Even though these refugees have revival abilities, they had limited combat strength. Balsas had asked them about their origins, but their answers were mostly gibberish. Despite some unresolved doubts about the refugees' background, Balsas decided it was alright to go ahead and trade with them for their services. He was about to take action when Black Phantom arrived and was warmly welcomed by the refugees. Balsas was alarmed. Is Black Phantom here for these refugees too? Does he know about their ability as well? Black Phantom was not someone to mess with, so Balsas decided to stay put and observe for the moment. However, an accident broke out. The beasts residing near the town attacked. Countless wild beasts came from the jungle and caused the ground to rumble. Grey devil wolves made up the majority. Their fur was charcoal gray, and they were as big as wild buffaloes. There were also giant purple-scaled pythons that were 10 to 20 meters long, slithering among the wolves. Beasts in the wild were common, and they were a threat faced by every town. Balsas commanded for the town to be locked up without hesitation and asked his soldiers to ready the machine guns on the watchtowers to fight the beasts. Players that were left outside the town became the buffer zone for them to hold off the beasts. Balsas was glad that he had refugees that could be sacrificed at no cost. Mature grey devil wolves were about LV-20. They pounced into the crowd and ripped apart a player in 2 to 3 bites. You have started emergency quest Protect Green Valleyville. Besides the normal players, Han Xiao received the emergency quest, too. However, to his dismay, the reward was at a newbie standard at only a few thousand EXP. Han Xiao watched with great interest at one side as the players fought against the beasts. Balsas realized that Han Xiao had crawled to the top of the town wall while he was not looking and was watching the battle intensely. Balsas was alarmed. Black Phantom was able to silently crawl up the wall when so many people were staring down at the town wall. This meant that he could silently creep up on anyone he wanted to as well. Indeed, he was living up to his reputation as a skilled and accomplished assassin. The players gave it their all to protect the town. The situation was bloody and violent. The players were not in complete defeat only because of the aid from the town's machine guns. Han Xiao closely watched the players' performances. Green Valleyville consisted mainly of players from two classes, Esper and Mechanic. He saw many different Espers: attribute boosting, superhuman strength, stamina, speed, instant healing, and elemental controls, which included skills such as gathering rocks or fortifying armor using rocks. There was a plethora of Espers, but most were low-level and short-lasting. They were dealing some damage to the wolves, but only a few Esper players were more notable. The fight between the players and the beasts was a rough one, so some players were live-streaming the battle on the forum. Han Xiao narrowed his eyes. He decided to join and end this battle quickly. With that, he jumped off the wall. Activating his electromagnetic hover boots, he moved as if there was ice under his feet. He dived into the battle like a bolt of black lightning, zooming through the battlefield, straight to a relatively smaller gray devil wolf, which was old and had little fur left. It was the leader of the pack, and Han Xiao noticed it when he was observing just now. Han Xiao decided not to snipe these beasts. Sniping would limit the area damage, and he had limited ammo with him. It was the perfect chance for him to see what he could do with his LV-50 attributes against these LV-20 beasts. Beasts were common on planet Aquamarine. When fighting against beasts in large scales, he would not dive in alone. It would be extremely dangerous because it would be exposing him to high-frequency attacks from all sides. The herd of beasts in Grey Valleyville was very small in numbers. With only thousands of wolves and snakes, Han Xiao could afford to show off his attributes. A few strong-built grey devil wolves immediately surrounded the Wolf King. With the howl from the old Wolf King, its guards pounced toward Han Xiao. Han Xiao was clad full body in his magnetically controlled retractable armor. He raised his arm to block off the sharp claws of the wolves, and the clashing sound was resounding. He was fighting off wolves, which were 4 to 5 times larger than him. He had 69 points in his strength attribute, way higher than the LV-20 Grey Devil wolves. His fingers dug into the flesh of a wolf's claws and threw the wolf over his head and onto the floor like a rag doll. But unlike a rag doll, the wolf landed and created a dent in the ground, whimpering. Players who saw the scene were shocked. The scene was very impactful. It was as if a dwarf was throwing a normal person over their shoulders. Han Xiao was elated to find out how strong his body was. His fists landed on a wolf like a pile driver with solid thuds. Every punch was filled with power that dealt damage right into the wolf's lungs. A wolf was flung away, but it would get up and lunge again, only to be flung away once more. The place that was hit would be marked with a deep purple bruises. The wolves began to crowd in to protect the Wolf King. Han Xiao's view was filled with wolves that were attacking him with claws and fangs from all angles. The retractable armor clashed with the sharp claws, and sparks were flying. Han Xiao could barely hold the weight of the wolves off from all sides, let alone move. It's indeed very difficult to kill and get through the beast crowd. Han Xiao changed his plan and activated the repulsive force generator, which sent a pushing force out and flung all the surrounding wolves into the wolves at the back. With his path cleared, Han Xiao pushed with his foot and turned up the speed of his hover boots. Wind was howling as he approached in the Wolf King at high speed. He blocked off the ferocious attacks from the Wolf King, grabbed the wolf's head, and twisted it, throwing it to the ground. He pressed his knee tightly against the wolf's stomach and pressed on its head with his left hand. Clenching his right fist, it landed right on the wolf's head. The Wolf King's head was crushed after a few punches. Blood spilled everywhere. Every time he punched, the power surging through his muscles, tendons, and bones was like a tight bow that stored great strength. It was greatly satisfying to feel at ease and in control of such great strength. A wolf's critical region was their stomach, but Han Xiao preferred attacking the head more. After a few punches, the Wolf King was only a few breaths away from death. The wolf pack was howling and had all abandoned the enemies to attack Han Xiao. A huge pack of wolves piled on top of him like a small hill. Han Xiao was pressed against the floor. The pungent wolf smell filled Han Xiao's nostrils, and his face became scrunched up. He was almost choking. His sharp sense allowed him to identify the components of the smell. Wolf's urine, soil, sweat, dried excrement, and et. Chapter 152, A Melee Mechanic is the Best. Pushing against the ground with both hands, he managed to support the weight of the huge pack of wolves on his back. Each wolf weighed at least 80 kilograms. While it was very taxing, Han Xiao finally spotted an opening and quickly tumbled out, simultaneously pulling out a hand grenade from his clothes and tossing it underneath the pack of wolves. Boom! A muffled sound erupted, and fragments of the grenade shot out with the flames caused by the explosion. The pack of wolves howled mournfully as fresh blood gushed out from their bodies. Han Xiao's armor was also splattered red. Staggering as he stood up, his hand brushed past his side as he brandished a foldable machete that had undergone many modifications. It was newly improved and could be said to be a royal edition. Han Xiao nimbly sprinted through the pack of wolves, his blade slashing through his enemies, bringing waves of fresh blood along his path. The venomous poison spat out by the purple-scaled python could not catch up to his footwork. With a flash of his blade, he sliced off the snake's head. The blade wound where the snake was decapitated was as smooth as a mirror, with fresh blood spurting continuously as the headless snake convulsed uncontrollably on the floor. All the wild beasts rushed toward him. Purely by borrowing the speed from the skating shoes and the defense from the magnetically controlled retractable armor, he could single-handedly massacre the flock of beasts. The players were left to the sidelines as they could only stare in shock and bewilderment as Han Xiao killed every beast that came his way. He was a mechanic, so how did he end up in a melee close-range fight? The players' eyes were all drawn to Han Xiao's elegant fighting style. It was undeniable that he was really suave. He was redefining the way most of them viewed mechanics. It turned out that it was not true that mechanics could only fight long distance. Their close-quarter combat skill was also of note and could be very aggressive. Also, they had a clear style of close-quarter combat that was distinctly different from pugilists. Frenzied Sword finally came online as he arrived at the outskirts of the town, out of breath. Seeing the situation with the wild beasts, it was also his first time watching Han Xiao display his skills. In that moment, he felt that he had found his guiding light. This was exactly the fighting style that he loved. One can tell just by looking at his ID. Choosing to follow Han Xiao was definitely the best decision. Frenzied Sword could barely suppress his excitement, he really did make the right choice back then. Not only Frenzied Sword, but a lot of other players were influenced by what has been going on in the forums. Players who were contemplating on whether to change classes began to take interest in mechanics again. After killing however many wolves and snakes, Han Xiao's field of vision suddenly cleared. He realized that the wolf pack was gradually withdrawing amid whimpers, and the group of purple-scaled pythons fled as well. Soon, the wild pack of beasts had all retreated, leaving corpses strewn across the floors, soaking the ground in bright red blood. He exhaled a breath and wiped off the traces of blood left on his armor. With his stats, dealing with such low-level beasts would leave them completely crushed. He still had 40% of his stamina left. Mechanics rarely fought their enemies by close combat. However, doing this occasionally did make him feel refreshed. Rather than using a fighting style that relied on sniping, which would lead to an instant death with each shot, this kind of real fist fighting feeling was much more suitable for de-stressing. Green Valleyville's guards came out to clean up the battlefield, carrying the dead corpses of the wild beasts back to the town as food supplies. Han Xiao rejected Bash's repeated invitation. Under the eyes of the excited players, he returned to his original position indifferently, pretending to rest as he closed his eyes. The interface indicated that the mission was complete. Also, he killed over 100 beasts, obtaining more than 20,000 EXP points in total. As his own level was much higher than his massacred targets, the EXP points he gained would be cut down by a lot, but no matter how small it was EXP nonetheless. The almighty mechanic Han would not mind it at all. The main purpose behind this fight was to test his current reflexes and to have a clearer understanding on his physical caliber. Only by doing that could he take care of smaller details in future battles and perform at his best. Another reason was that he wanted to continue to show off a mechanic's abilities. He realized that Esper players often showed off their coolest abilities, but new mechanic players were still a minority. He guessed that mechanics would become a class that would be questioned, so he wanted to shift the players' focus from Espers by showing them how mechanics could be great players too. Opening the forum, Han Xiao realized that there were players who had uploaded a video footage of the fight just now. The title was shocking. Overpowered? Mechanics can actually fight like this. The recording showed Han Xiao almost single-handedly conquering a wild beast fight. The visuals were very impactful. In the past, he had mainly used sniping, killing his enemies in one shot, or used his turrets and rovers' high firepower, but he had never showed off his individual fighting ability. This time, he highlighted this, and the real-time comments and replies mostly conveyed shock and amazement. But he realized that below the post, there was a reply that was manually pushed up. Looking at the ID, it was Luzman. His tone was as harsh as before. Black Phantom is indeed very strong, I won't deny that, but mechanics are really trash. Look carefully at the start of the video. Espers are the central force when fighting with wild beasts, and those players who advance to become mechanics can only sit at the side and fire aimlessly without a single use for them. I presume this clip was probably recorded by a mechanic. Other than the mechanics who can be idling at one side, I guess no other players would have this kind of time in an actual fight. Also, stop sharing Black Phantom's videos, this asshole wants to trick me into becoming a mechanic again. As he continued down the post, the replies split into those who supported Luzman and those who disagreed with him. Han Xiao smacked his lips. He was a little annoyed. Luzman held on to that point and had been smearing his reputation. This would be a hindrance to his business. The player's attention was drawn toward this discussion. His display of abilities seemed to be less impactful now. With Han Xiao's rich experience in discussion, with one look, he could tell that Luzman was a keyboard warrior who posted derogatory comments everywhere to trigger fights online. Scratching his head, Han Xiao did not really have a good solution to this. This was a discussion that would obviously come up, just like picking between sweet tofu or salty tofu. As long as nobody restricted it, there was no way to stop others from commenting online. But I'm only an NPC now. Even if I showed off my abilities, it isn't enough to get more people to believe in mechanics. There isn't anything else that I can do either, it's not like I can go in front of the players and shout I'm actually a player. Han Xiao felt helpless. The NPC template was his secret that he did not want to disclose. From the perspective of a player though, seeing an NPC shout I'm a player would only cause them to feel curious and amused. Not many would believe it to be true, and most would think that it was an Easter egg or a character design, just like Deadpool. There were some simulation games in the past where fictional characters inside would say that they knew of the player's existence, but who would believe it to be true? Those who really did believe it had already been corrected by Yang Technologies. The smell of blood had yet to fade away. Frenzied Sword, who had run over from a distance away, attracted the attention of the players. Galaxy Times had announced his movements, and Frenzied Sword had gained some short-lived fame. He was recognized in a moment. The players around them began whispering to one another, looking in envy. Isn't that the professional gamer mentioned by the program? He has a picture on the promotional ad. He really does have a special relationship with Black Phantom. I want to unlock a hidden quest with the Black Phantom, too. Frenzied Sword waddled over to Han Xiao's side. Han Xiao regarded this player, who had some potential, well. It was alright to embarrass Frenzied Sword in front of NPCs, but he did not have the heart to do so in front of the crowd of players. No matter what, Frenzied Sword was also a professional gamer, and his image was very important. Han Xiao randomly assigned some regular mission. When Frenzied Sword received the mission, his face was overcome with disappointment. Collect materials. That's so boring. You might as well tell me to dance. Han Xiao's lips curved up. Habits were indeed scary. Just then, a player walked over. The ID above his head read Laughing Blade. He asked, Frenzied Sword. Once Frenzied Sword saw this person, his face fell as he dryly replied, it's you. So, you're here to play Galaxy as well. Why aren't you playing Night anymore? Haha, it's not challenging enough, Laughing Blade said half-mockingly. Some players recognized Laughing Blade. Isn't that the professional gamer, Laughing Blade? I heard he was one of the top 3 players in Night, he even won 2 championships before. Laughing Blade enjoyed the player's surprise thoroughly. His eyes hid feelings of condescension as he looked at Frenzied Sword. In the past, Frenzied Sword had also been a professional gamer in Night. In official competitions, he had suffered countless defeats to Laughing Blade, and his fame was far from that of Laughing Blade. Laughing Blade saw the rewards assigned to Frenzied Sword on Galaxy Times and realized that his old opponent was better off than him. Feeling green from jealousy, he intentionally came to stir up trouble. After a few words, he pretended to ask casually, since we've met, let's have a PvP duel. I'm an Esper, what about you? Mechanic. Frenzied Sword was slightly hesitant. Even though he was under Han Xiao's mentorship, his current mechanic abilities were very unsuited for battle. Subconsciously, he wanted to reject the duel. Unexpectedly, Laughing Blade suddenly said, "Since we've known each other for so many years, let's have a friendly duel. You can't possibly reject a small request like this, or do you look down on me?" Frenzied Sword was speechless. Those words made it hard for him to reject. There was no need to have a falling out with someone in the same industry over something small like this. Laughing Blade laughed coldly in his mind. He had said that because he was afraid that Frenzied Sword would reject the deal. He wanted to have a duel with Frenzied Sword only because he had gained some popularity on Galaxy. Once he obtained some fame, it made him easy to become someone else's prey. If he were to defeat Frenzied Sword, he could probably tone down the latter's popularity. For a professional gamer who had attended a program to be defeated by him, he could become a little more famous as well. Laughing Blade was very confident. He felt that an awakened Esper was quite strong. His elementary application was a rock-earth fusion armor that was suitable for defense. It was strong against pistols, so he felt that his chances of winning were quite high. Even if he were to lose, he could test the gap between them. Anyway, at this point, they would not die. Laughing Blade felt that this deal only had benefits to him, and he would not have any losses. Also, he looked toward Black Phantom, who was standing at one side, his gaze lighting up. If Frenzied Sword can unlock a hidden quest, I'll give it a try too. Chapter 153, Controlling Behind the Scenes. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Han Xiao watched with interest from the side. Laughing Blade? No impression of him. Probably not important enough in Galaxy. Frenzied Sword would eventually become a legendary player in the future, but right now, he was bowing his head to Laughing Blade. This scene left him feeling nostalgic. For some reason, it brought him back to those days in the past, when he first started. Back then, there was a point in time when his power leveling business was dwindling. To find other ways to get income, he had entered a small office to help them mine gold to earn some rewards. That office often forced him to work overtime and cut his pay. Asking them about pay would only elicit answers that were nothing short of excuses. The office's boss took advantage of being a business owner. When Han Xiao asked about his pay for the 9th time and started arguing with him, the boss told him that if he wanted to continue, he could; if he was not going to continue, he could just scram. If he continued to complain, then he would PK him until his level reached 0. What else could Han Xiao do? He was also very exasperated. All he could do was to use his main account to show the boss why the business was doing so well. For a few weeks, he massacred all the players in the office till it suffered heavy losses and was on the verge of closing down. Then, he earned a reasonably large amount of reimbursement in exchange for his emotional losses. In-game blackmailing was not illegal. The happy times are gone, there's no turning back. Han Xiao puffed as he smoked. As he overcame his obstacles, he could only appreciate it now because of his past experiences. Frenzied Sword could only accept Laughing Blade's request. Currently, he was LV11, way ahead of average players' levels. Other than a mechanics repairing and reinforcement skills, he could only use basic shooting and fighting skills. Han Xiao had complete understanding of Frenzied Sword's fighting abilities. With a flash in his eyes, he called out to Frenzied Sword. "Come here." Frenzied Sword was a little confused as he followed orders accordingly. Han Xiao took off his thermoelectrical incisor gloves, secretly giving them to him. With a look at the glove stats, Frenzied Sword's breathing stopped for a moment, his face overcome with shock and surprise. "I'm only lending them to you, you have to return them." Han Xiao erased Frenzied Sword's unrealistic hopes. Frenzied Sword was still very touched. It was the right decision to suck up to Han Xiao, he could even receive such a benefit. Is it because he's afraid that I'll lose, making him lose face? Putting on the gloves, Frenzied Sword had a greater sense of confidence. Standing 15 meters apart from Laughing Blade, both of them braced themselves, getting ready to attack. Nearby, players began crowding around to watch the show. They were mainly curious about Frenzied Sword and wanted to see the difference between a professional gamer who had his name reported on the system and a regular player. Even if he is a professional player, he should be about the same level in these early stages. With only a few basic abilities, he probably can't show off his mechanic abilities as well. I think there's an advantage in these early stages. Maybe he's practiced fighting before in real life, or he's someone who was in the military. After all, the controls here are so realistic. The players murmured to one another. With a low cry, Laughing Blade made the first move, launching himself forward. With every step, the sand on the ground wrapped itself around his calves and snaked up to his body, forming a sandstone armor covering his body. His pistol can only fire at most 5 shots, and my abilities can definitely hold him off. As long as I close the distance between us, he's definitely finished. Laughing Blade thought. The players were all new. The level of their control was only at a level where they understood how to use the skills and what they did. Laughing Blade's decision was correct, but Frenzied Sword's reaction gave Laughing Blade a shock. Instead of moving back and using the pistol to kite him, he rushed forward instead. Both people quickly collided into one another. Without thinking twice, Laughing Blade sent his fist, which was wrapped in sandstone armor, flying toward Frenzied Sword, and Frenzied Sword met his fist with his black gloved palm. Could this glove be special equipment? Just as Laughing Blade had this thought, he suddenly experienced a series of burning pains. Stunned, he realized that his health points were reduced to 0 in that moment. His vision turned black as he immediately died. From the start to end, this duel only lasted 3 seconds. On the battlefield, only Frenzied Sword remained. The wind blew up the edges of his clothes. Expressionless, he truly resembled a solitary professional at the top of his game. The surrounding players watched, dazed, unable to react. Was that an instant KO? That's way too fast. Too overpowered. No wonder he could get on Galaxy Times. Could the secret quest really have given him such a huge lead over the rest of us? Everyone was a new player. Technically, their battle power should have been about the same. Using a pistol, it would take at least 4 or 5 shots before one would die, and Laughing Blade's Esper ability obviously strengthened his defense. Some players remembered Laughing Blade's performance during the Wild Beast attack. When he was surrounded by 2 Grey Wolves, he was still able to hold them off. But when he fought with Frenzied Sword, he died instantly just by meeting fists with him. What kind of godly attack power was this? Everyone stared at Frenzied Sword's glove, envy showing on their faces. That is high-level equipment. Mechanics can make something like that? I thought they could only make guns. I really want one too. Not long after, the revived Laughing Blade ran over, his face looking dark as he said unhappily, "Didn't we agree that it would be a friendly battle? How could you? He originally wanted to say how could he have killed him, but he felt that saying it would be too shameful. Having defeated an old opponent, Frenzied Sword only felt refreshed from being able to settle all the discontent from the past as he chuckled. Sorry, I didn't know you were so vulnerable. This sentence made Laughing Blade so angry that he could felt the heat rising up from his chest. Calling me vulnerable for dying. It was a complete loss for him. Dying once cost him a lot of EXP. Laughing Blade was very upset. He initially thought that once the duel reached a certain point, they would end it, but he did not expect to be an instant killed, not to mention he could not even blame Frenzied Sword. He was so distressed that he could feel his heart tightening up over this horrible situation. After the crowd around them had left, Frenzied Sword obediently returned the gloves to Han Xiao, hesitating as he asked, "Han. Black Phantom, are you selling these gloves?" Han Xiao looked at him from the side of his eye, opening up the shop listing as he added thermoelectrical incisor gloves at a fixed price of 80,000 with a reputation of 15 points. This set of gloves was a prize that he had seized from Rose Militant. After learning the basic knowledge up front, he had instead experimented to create the blueprints to create the thermoelectrical incisor gloves. By spending some EXP, he could make one on his own now. Frenzied Sword was instantly motivated. Excitedly, he clenched his fists. This close combat equipment designed for mechanics was his favorite. I can't afford it now, but I will be able to, sooner or later. Then, Laughing Blade suddenly inched closer. His gaze lit, he stared at Han Xiao and asked, "Black Phantom, I heard you're enemies with Germinal. I want to join you." In this time frame, the discussion board had all sorts of different guesses as to how one could trigger the Black Phantom secret quest. They thought that as long as one showed their intention to become Germinal's enemies, there was a chance that they could trigger Black Phantom's secret quest. Many players were guessing the phrase to trigger that. In his short time in Green Valleyville, Han Xiao had heard several of such guesses and had rejected them all. This led the players to a final conclusion: it was all about possibility when one was trying to trigger Black Phantom's secret quest. Laughing Blade was also trying his luck. Han Xiao raised an eyebrow and said, "Oh. You seem to be not bad. There's a lead." Laughing Blade grinned in surprise. Frenzied Sword's heart fell. Getting nervous, he could feel a strong sense of discomfort welling within him for some reason. "But you don't seem to be up to par yet." Han Xiao suddenly changed his words as he waved, rejecting Laughing Blade. Laughing Blade had not even finished his breath and was left speechless for a while. His expression was annoyed. With his heart full of jealousy toward Frenzied Sword, he muttered to himself in anger, "This guy is really some lucky dog." Frenzied Sword heaved a sigh of relief, regaining his composure. Han Xiao almost laughed aloud upon seeing Frenzied Sword's reaction, as if he were a guy who had almost been cheated on. What kind of description was that? What would that make me? Han Xiao tossed aside this crazy idea. On the interface, quite an amount of EXP had accumulated. For players in Green Valleyville who intended to change their class, they all would have completed that by the next day. Han Xiao would prepare to leave after that. While he was collecting EXP, someone recorded Frenzied Sword and Laughing Blade's battle and uploaded it onto the forum. Luzman was a player who came from Bighorn Village. By luck, he had managed to get into the phases of beta testing and had been saving his money before he switched his class. He wanted to join the strongest class. When it was time for public testing, he saw Black Phantom's battle and was captivated. Hurriedly, he wanted to switch to become a mechanic. Other players tried to complete tasks to improve their relationship with Black Phantom, but Luzman could not wait. He used his money to gain 5 reputation points with Black Phantom. From the 5 basic knowledges that Black Phantom taught, he learned basic weaponry knowledge as he liked this name the most. But Luzman quickly realized that mechanics were not as strong as Black Phantom made them out to be. After losing continuously in the duel, he felt that he had been cheated. This class was way too weak. But he could not bear to abandon his beta testing account and had asked the customer service if he could change his class, but that was of course not possible, leaving him infuriated. What a waste of having this opportunity to enter the beta test. This account is useless now. Luzman had been extremely frustrated. Going onto the forums, he had put up posts everywhere, regardless of topic. He had planned to thoroughly bash the mechanic class by repeating how trashy it was and let all of the players know that mechanic was a trashy class. Players had debated after his comments. Initially, Luzman had been satisfied with what he saw. That was his original intention. He had also enjoyed the feeling of his words being taken seriously by others. Chapter 154, Al-Yuma Researcher Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Scrolling through the forum, Luzman realized that he had been tagged. He clicked into the post, and there was a video of Frenzied Sword and Laughing Blade dueling, and people were gloatingly asking him to explain himself. Luzman had recently gone crazy hard on mechanics on the various forums. His stance was not the most annoying thing, him posting everywhere was what annoyed people the most. He constantly forced people to read his post as if they were not already aware of his comments. This behavior made him loathed by everyone. At Luzman, a mechanic has killed an Esper. Why don't you come out and explain? After watching the video, Luzman immediately retorted, this is just a rare instance. That Laughing Blade did not know how to play at all. Ha, you've suffered consecutive duel losses, but how did someone else win? Just admit you're a rookie, Luzman. Luzman stifled his anger and replied, Frenzied Sword has triggered a secret quest. He was more advanced in rank and equipment, there is no point in battling. Do you mean the equipment given by NPCs isn't enough? Then what for are you doing missions for? Taking rewards for what? Collecting money for what? Just admit you're a rookie and stand still when being scolded. Damn it. Luzman was fuming, he straight away came back. What I said about mechanics being weak was none of your business. Then why are you posting that everywhere? Think before you speak, won't you? Luzman was exasperated. Damn you, can you stop barking? Are you that low for you to come and be scolded by me? Finally, your true colors have shown. You're a troll, stop acting. You chose this profession on your own, how can you say you were cheated? This is hilarious, who do you think you are? Why would the gaming company cheat you? Were you looking for your sense of existence everywhere? I would not have chosen Esper if the Black Phantom did not lie to me. Oh, it wasn't my fault, it's the world's fault. Nobody pointed a gun at you, Forcing you to choose your class, did they? Are you that dumb to push the blame to an NPC? If you regret it, open a new account, and stop posting everywhere, you brat. Son of AB*TCH, Luzman was seething. At this moment, an official message appeared on Luzman's screen. It was detected that you frequently used insulting terms, hence your forum account will be banned for 3 days. Luzman was stunned. What the hell? He was unable to reply. Naturally, the players on the forum soon discovered this and gloated at him. Haha, banned for cursing, aren't you? This is great. Let's go, he is clearly a troll. Luzman could only read and not reply. He was indignant and sullen, itching to smash something. That's interesting. Han Xiao finished reading the forum's comments, and his fingers were itching to reply, but sadly, he could not. Thinking back when he was on the forum, he loved to watch people getting into a catfight, that was a great pastime. However, there were some people who got really angry because of the catfight, these were the people who were too innocent. If you are unable to win an argument, just treat it as something to do for fun. Everything on the internet is pointless, it is all virtual and will not affect you in real life. Han Xiao had also once been a despised power leveler. He had been bashed by other players. When there was nothing to do, he could get into a catfight and treat it as something to lighten up his day. Looking at the lively players on the forum while he himself could only be a spectator, Han Xiao felt very lonely. He missed the days when he was involved in a fiery verbal sparring, even though he had always felt that the term verbal sparring was filthy. Looking at the time, it was nearing dusk, and the battlefield had been cleaned up. Han Xiao heard an engine from afar, he raised his eyes and gazed into the distance. There were a few off-road vehicles speeding across the muddy road. Green Valleyville opened its gates, and Balsas was standing beside the gate to welcome these few vehicles with respect. A thought flashed through Han Xiao's mind. The vehicle has an Alumera crest. When the off-road vehicle drove into the town, armed guards got off the bus and guarded a man who was dressed exquisitely. Xiao Jian, the second leader of Alumera, had sent the emissary Xiao Rui to South Continent to find a germinal bounty, 0. More than half a year ago, the Alumera family had realized that the appearance of this 0 was exactly the same as the missing Han Xiao, so Xiao Jin sent people to look for him. However, they had ended up empty-handed for a long time. Xiao Rui was the leader of the search team. Balsas was extremely deferential towards Xiao Rui. He led everyone into the main house. The table was set with drinks and piping hot, fragrant barbecued meat. There was a cross-sectional cut on it, and the texture of the skin looked like a wave of an ocean. There was a hint of pink in the middle of the reddish-brown flesh. It was clear that the meat was tender even without biting into it. It was Grey Devil Wolf's meat that had been collected 2 hours ago, and it was extremely fresh. Other dishes included some vegetables and mashed potato-like crop. In this rogue town, the expenses of the dishes were considerable, and Xiao Rui was very satisfied with Balsas' hospitality. The group sat down around the food, and Xiao Rui, who was covered in dust, scoffed down the food. He ate 3 pieces of barbecue meat in one go and only slowed down after he swallowed them. He wiped his mouth and said calmly to Balsas, who waiting at one side, "I will rest for a few days in your territory and continue to find that damn bastard." "I'll get someone to prepare the rooms," Balsas replied. "Let me know again of any requests." Xiao Rui's status in the family was higher than his, hence Balsas' posture was awfully low. Okay. Xiao Rui was pleased with Balsas' attitude. He decided to stay for a few days more in Green Valleyville. He had spent this last half a year searching for news of 0 in the South Continent, and he had enough of this aimless searching, it was a form of torture. Ever since Han Xiao's disappearance, the family thought that he was dead and did not take it to heart. However, after finding out that he had become 0, everyone was shocked. Alumera did not wish to provoke Germinal. Thus, to find out what exactly happened, Xiao Jin assigned him to bring Han Xiao back to the family for questioning, yet the target had not been found after 6 months. Xiao Rui was filled with resentment toward Han Xiao. It was all because of this regenerated guy that he could not enjoy his life in comfort at his family's headquarters. He had met Han Xiao a few times before, he was weak and hopeless. If not for him being Xiao Jin's biological son, he would have been sent to clean the toilets. Xiao Rui was an orphan adopted from a war, and there were many orphans like him under Xiao Jin. All of them grew up competing with one another, and each racked their brains scheming to improve their status. Hence, he was extremely envious of Han Xiao as he did not have to struggle as much. Initially, when he heard that Han Xiao had died, he was secretly very happy during his funeral. He knew that his adopted brothers felt the same way even though they were grieving on the outside. The first impression Xiao Rui had of Han Xiao made it difficult for him to link Han Xiao and the zero that was talked about on the dark net. "Why didn't you just die and leave me alone? Why must you give me so much trouble?" Xiao Rui had grumbled on more than one occasion. He looked at Balsas and chatted for a while before asking casually, "Is there anything going on recently in this town?" "Yes, those refugees outside," Balsas told him about his findings. Xiao Rui was surprised. "There's actually such a weird crowd? You have to report your findings to the family." "I know. There's something else. Black Phantom is also resting in this town. His reason is unknown, he claims that it was on the way." Xiao Rui's heart skipped a beat. Black Phantom is here, too. Recently, the Darknet's killer list had been updated. Black Phantom's rank had risen to 7th, and he was very active. To know that this legendary killer was nearby, Xiao Rui was somewhat uneasy. "We'd better not provoke him," Balsas replied. Xiao Rui was undecided as he knitted his brows together in a deep frown. He turned and saw Lu Cheng, his expressionless personal bodyguard who was right behind him. This eased his nervous mood. Lu Cheng sensed Xiao Rui's gaze and reassured him indifferently. "Don't worry. Even if we face Black Phantom, I can still protect your life. He can't do anything to me." The sun was setting. Ever since the off-road vehicles entered the town, Han Xiao had felt a change in Green Valleyville. The town's lookout had kept a close watch on him, as if they were worried about his activities. From this small detail, Han Xiao was fairly confident that the person on the vehicle that had entered the town was an important character. "I don't have a deep impression of Alumera's family. It seems like they were not a special group in the original quest." "Oh, I've recalled. I think in the secondary quest of the power struggle of vagrant warlords, this family was the one of the strongest powers." "Yes, this secondary quest and Bennett's refugee quest had a partial conflict. The vagrants and I did not have a lot of interactions, don't think it will affect this quest." Han Xiao had been eyeing Bennett's quest for a long time. He did not know when it started, but with his good relationship with Bennett, coupled with the positive notes from the Darknet organization, as well as his universal reputation, there was a high chance that he would be invited by Bennett to participate in the refugee plan, and that would be Aquamarine's second main quest. Chapter 155, Fruit of Face. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. As a participant in the main quest mission, the mission Han Xiao would receive should be quite different from the other players, and he was very excited. Alumera seemed like an indirect enemy. Han Xiao rubbed his chin and muttered to himself, "We'll see when the time comes. There isn't any cause for concern now. This is just a small territory." The interface showed that he had accumulated more than 1 million EXP. Aquamarine had 19 novice villages. Excluding the 6 on Andrea mainland and not counting Bighorn Village and Green Valleyville, this meant that Han Xiao still had 11 chances of earning from teaching mechanic skills to those who switched to the mechanics class. This was more than enough for him to rise till LV60, after which he could then go to some dangerous places, collecting rare abilities, skills, and machinery. Hence, it was rumored that max level is the beginning. Although he did not have a rank limit imposed by the version, the quality-price ratio to continuously increase his rank was not the highest. Since Han Xiao possessed a huge channel of EXP, he used it extravagantly to improve his skills. Talent points could not be used carelessly, but EXP did not really matter. He straight away upgraded 3 skills to the highest level, Flaming Will, Overload, and Moving Snipe. These 3 combat skills were all important, and the explosive power was upgraded once again. If Flaming Will and Overload were to start at the same time, it was even possible for the Ghost Sniper rifle to take over 2000 HP. The 3 skills were fully upgraded, and they brought along 3 talent points. His accumulated talent points were 24 now, and he saved them so as to not use them unnecessarily. With the remaining EXP, Han Xiao fused his knowledge together and randomly obtained new blueprints. Fortunately, the fusion this time around was quite good. Sunworm Portable Flamethrower, the flame had continuous damage. The important point was that it had a small volume but a large range of impact. It could be carried with you or loaded as a small component on a vehicle or robot. A player who took the role of patrolling in the town suddenly dashed over and shouted in fear, I found an army. They are approaching, and they have triggered a mission. The players of Greentownville became restless and all went to check out their interface. Han Xiao's brow jumped momentarily. He actually received a mission too. You have triggered a random mission, Invasion of Green Valleyville. Mission summary: Green Valleyville, which is controlled by the Alumera family, is very close to the inhabited land, Black Pine, Lu Cheng's territory. There has been continuous friction between them. Now, Lu Cheng's troops are once again invading Green Valleyville. You can choose to help the Alumera family protect Green Valleyville or help Lu Cheng attack. Please choose your position. Mission requirements: tip off Balsas and protect Green Valleyville. Otherwise, you can choose to join Lu Cheng's troops and attack Green Valleyville. Note: once you have picked a side, you are not allowed to switch. Mission rewards: 1. By protecting Green Valleyville, you will receive 12,000 EXP and 3,000 aquamarine dollars. 2. By helping Lu Cheng compete the attack, you will receive 10,000 EXP. I actually received the novice mission as well? Han Xiao broke into laughter. He did not care about this small reward, but Lu Cheng, who was mentioned in the mission, caught his attention. If he remembered correctly, Lu Cheng was Old Man Lu's son, a South Continent vagrant who was a big warlord. Old Man Lu's 4 blueprints could only be obtained from Lu Cheng. An idea came to Han Xiao's head, and he immediately made a decision. As long as he got to interact with Lu Cheng, he would then be able to know when the secret quest would begin. As for those 4 uncommon blueprints, he had been eyeing them for a long time. I will observe for a while, see if the leader is Lu Cheng himself or his subordinate. Han Xiao took out his sniper rifle and oiled it. He idled around and appeared as a sharp contrast to the busy players around him. This urgent mission resulted in the players taking action. Some of them immediately chose to protect Green Valleyville, which offered a higher reward, and went to tip off the guard. There were still some players surveying the situation first. Balsas received the information and jumped out of his lover's bed in shock. He hurriedly threw on his clothes and arrived at the town's lookout tower with quick steps. The observatory was built with stones and bricks, and the top was spread with weeds as a ceiling. Damn it, the bastard of Black Pine came again. Balsas cursed with a pair of gloomy triangular eyes. Green Valleyville was just one part of Alumera, and Lu Cheng was actually a local vagrant warlord from the South Continent. His power was even more tremendous. Lu Cheng's headquarters were in Black Pine, and Green Valleyville was located just dozens of miles away. Lu Cheng had eyed this strategic location for a long time and tried to invade several times. No one had expected him to launch an attack today. Xiao Rui arrived beside Balsas and pointed at the dense mess of surrounding players and assured him, "Don't worry, don't we have cannon fodder?" Balsas' eyes lit up. With this bunch of unbeatable eccentric refugees, they were able to counteract Lu Cheng's military advantage. Balsas called the assistant and ordered, "Go tell that bunch of refugees outside that I need them to ward off Lu Cheng's army. As long as they completed my mission, everyone will receive money. Don't give too much," Xiao Rui added on. "Their lives are worthless." "I understand. This bunch of refugees were the best cannon fodder, they were the trump card to defeating Lu Cheng." Balsas let out a sinister smile. "Luck is on our side." Lu Cheng sat in the middle of a war chariot and looked serious. This unit had more than 60 off-road armored vehicles equipped with machine guns and rockets, followed by hundreds of fully equipped elite soldiers. They were all trained and qualified soldiers. One soldier could fight at least 3 enemies, and the soldiers knew how to work together in different formations. They were not a common vagrant of the mob. Lu Cheng had been coveting Green Valleyville for a long time. There was a strategic mountain pass between this town and his land, Black Pine. Once he seized the town, there would be no worries in the future. "We must capture Green Valleyville this time round." The troops were getting closer to Green Valleyville. Lu Cheng soon noticed the crowd surrounding the town. They wore ragged garments, like a group of refugees, guarding the town. Lu Cheng's face immediately darkened, and there was a trace of anger in his eyes. What a despicable bastard to use refugees as cannon fodder. He ordered the military fleet to park a distance away from the town, just outside of the firing range of the machine guns. The smoke and dust quickly dissipated. The ruts left on the muddy road exuded a burning smell, and the heat from the friction somewhat contorted the air. The players who chose to protect the town all held onto their weapons tightly and waited on high alert. The cold armored vehicles and the compressed gun barrels made many people nervous. They swallowed their saliva with unease. Beads of sweat on their foreheads were reflecting light under the sun. Many observing players had some doubts. Were they not allowed to choose their camp? It seemed like that they would begin fighting any minute now, and they might have no time to choose a side. Balsas, are you thinking of blocking my gunfire with these pathetic fellows? Lu Cheng took out a megaphone, and his voice traveled out. Everyone in the town could hear his voice clearly. My men are able to tear them to shreds easily. Do you want me to paint your territory with fresh blood? Balsas emerged above the wall and smiled coldly. Lu Cheng frowned and looked at the group of shabbily dressed refugees. He calmly offered, I'll give you the opportunity to leave now. There is no need to die here. The refugees were restless for a while, but he realized that they did not waver despite that. Are these people unafraid of death? Lu Cheng was astonished. He realized that there was not the slightest bit of fear on this bunch of refugees' faces. He hesitated to give the command of attack. Balsas faintly guessed the values of this group of refugees. What they cared about the most was profit instead of their lives. Seeing Lu Cheng's hesitation, Balsas was very proud of himself and was rather scornful of Lu Cheng's indecisiveness. He ridiculed lowly, what an excessive tendency to clemency. To be apprehensive toward endangering the refugees' lives would only hinder his battle. Lu Cheng's choice appeared awfully stupid in Balsas' eyes. Balsas grinned evilly and was about to order the refugees to counterattack when he suddenly realized that there was movement from the sidelines. Black Phantom. Han Xiao stretched his back and strode unhurriedly to the center of the confrontation. He instantly caught the attention of both sides and the players. He crossed his arms and called loudly, "Give me some face. If you all want to go to war, do it tomorrow." His voice was as good as a loudspeaker. Everyone was taken aback. Why is he intervening? Balsas immediately swallowed back his almost released order. Lu Cheng froze, sizing Han Xiao up, before exclaiming hoarsely, "Black Phantom! Why is this fellow here?" The commanders of both sides were afraid of the consequences, so they ordered the troops to lay down their weapons. The tense atmosphere of confrontation dissipated immediately. The players were bewildered. They were not very familiar with Aquamarine's background. From the mission brief, it was known that Balsas and Lu Cheng were warlords of influence. Black Phantom gave out an order on his own, and the two warlords with armed forces immediately feared the consequences. This roused the players' curiosity. With one sentence from Black Phantom, he was able to halt the war. He was able to make the two warlords overlook their feud. Who exactly was he? Just how high was his status to dare say the phrase "give me some face"? The most terrifying thing was that the two warlords halted immediately. How much weight does he carry? Then the players noticed something else. These NPCs all recognized Black Phantom. Exactly how big was his reputation on the planet? Could it already be to the point where he was able to cut in anywhere he went? Is this Red Hair Shank's legendary ability, Fruit of Face 1? Bun Hit Dog, who was secretly videoing the scene, was thrilled. This kind of news material was exactly what he wanted. Chapter 156, one more in the support team. Retreat, set up the camp. Lu Cheng took a deep look at Han Xiao and swept his eyes across the refugees. He let his troops pitch a camp in the distance and eyed covetously. The players became restless. Some players who had yet to choose their side were surveying the situation. It seemed like the Green Valleyville side had a higher possibility of winning. The sky became dark. Han Xiao walked over to Lu Cheng's camp, and the guards hastily raised their guns when they saw him approaching. "Relax, I just want to have a short discussion with your leader," Han Xiao assured them. The guards continued to hold onto their guns and did not allow Han Xiao to enter the camp. At this moment, Lu Cheng heard the commotion and walked over. Let him in. If Black Phantom wanted to kill him, there was no need to inform him. It seemed like he had other intentions. He permitted the guards to make way and lead Han Xiao into the newly built tent. Frenzied Sword followed after Han Xiao. Lu Cheng sat down casually, not worried that Han Xiao might threaten his life. With his hands clasped under his chin, he remarked, "The famous Black Phantom actually appeared in this small place. I don't know the reason of your intervention. I don't think Balsas is qualified to hire a killer of your status, so what is your purpose of visiting me?" Han Xiao got straight to the point. "I'm here to help you." "Help me?" Lu Cheng became suspicious. "We have not met before." Han Xiao casually made up a reason. "You are more likable than Balsas." Lu Cheng felt strange and paused before commenting, "Balsas? He's a despicable fellow." He actually let the refugees act as cannon fodder. I really don't understand, why did this bunch of refugees disregard their lives? What benefits did Balsas give them exactly? Could it be that he detained their family to threaten them? I gave them an opportunity to live, yet they don't want to leave. They don't have much combat strength, why don't you just crush them? With your armed forces' strength, it would be a completely one-sided massacre. Han Xiao half smiled. Lu Cheng's face was blank. He declined to comment and changed the topic. Black Phantom, I don't know you, and I don't know why you want to help me. What do you plan to do, kill Balsas? I believe this is an easy task for you. No, I don't want to kill people, Han Xiao said perfunctory. Lu Cheng's lips twisted. A killer said he did not wish to kill people? This is more ridiculous than saying a navy can't swim. Then how do you plan to help me? You are concerned about the refugees. I can help you resolve that. Lu Cheng raised his eyebrows. You can convince them. Perhaps. Then what do you want from me? Lu Cheng did not believe that a legendary killer, who was a stranger, would help for free. He was certain that the Black Phantom had a motive, but he did not understand what the Black Phantom fancied from him. I don't need a reward. Lu Cheng's eyes darkened, and he stared at Han Xiao's eyes. What he saw was a dense fog, and he was unable to penetrate Han Xiao's thoughts. Generally speaking, if one did not want a reward, it meant that the person harbored other intentions and bigger ambitions. Silence. Frenzied Sword felt lost as he was listening to their conversation, but that did not hinder him from sensing that the atmosphere had become rigid, and his nape somewhat tightened. After 2 minutes of deadlock, Lu Cheng did not say anything at the end. He nodded and said slowly, then I'll count on you. Han Xiao petted Frenzied Sword's shoulder while walking out of Lu Cheng's camp, saying, I've things for you to do. You triggered the mission disseminating of information. The mission was to disseminate the information of Black Phantom joining Lu Cheng's camp, using reputation as a form of reward. The greater the number of people who came to know this information, the higher the reward would be, and players were surprisingly counted in as the head count. Frenzied Sword did not doubt him and diligently went to disseminate this piece of information in Green Valleyville. Perhaps the ordinary players would be amazed to encounter this type of real-life interaction mission, but Frenzied Sword had gone through Han Xiao's baptism of love, and hence was not shocked at any kind of mission anymore. Next up will be to see how much influence I have, Han Xiao said. Frenzied Sword was really efficient, and perhaps because he had a bit of a fame now, the news spread through words of mouth quickly. Very soon, it had spread throughout Green Valleyville. Then there was a huge commotion among the community of players. If we choose Green Valleyville, does it mean we'll become enemies with Black Phantom? How is it possible to beat him? Is this a mission guide? The players were panicking. The image of Han Xiao ferociously killing the beasts was still deeply etched in their minds. Becoming enemies with Black Phantom would be equivalent to courting death. The situation of the mission was immediately turned upside down. The chances of Green Valleyville winning had become an all-time low. Also, choosing to protect Green Valleyville meant that the players had to attack Black Phantom. That would result in a decline in their likability with Black Phantom. That was too big a sacrifice for such a small mission. If they were to fight for real, should they attack him or not? If they did not attack him, how could they protect Greentownville? This was a thorny problem. The players who had chosen Green Valleyville were gloomy. They felt they had no chance of winning. If they want to complete the mission, they could only join Lu Cheng's camp, but they were unable to re-elect their camp. Bun Hit Dog was very decisive, he was the first to advance to Lu Cheng's camp. The mission was second, his main objective was to capture more of Han Xiao's acts. The guards had received Lu Cheng's orders and allowed the refugees to pass. Bun Hit Dog successfully joined Lu Cheng's camp, and Han Xiao, who was observing at one side, narrowed his eyes as he noticed Bun Hit Dog. This ID seems familiar. Isn't he a video master? Han Xiao remembered Bun Hit Dog's ID, he was a rather famous video master uploader. He had done many seasons of the Galaxy series and was very well received. At this moment, Han Xiao had another idea. Han Xiao strode out and stopped in front of Bun Hit Dog. You made a wise choice, I feel that you have potential. Do you want to become my temporary assistant? Han Xiao asked. Bun Hit Dog's eyes became as big as saucers. He was stupefied. Did he just trigger the secret quest? He never had any extravagant expectations, but he did not expect himself to come upon it. This is life, you might not get what you want, yet what you don't want could be gifted to you. This is too unexpected. Bun Hit Dog was suddenly frozen on the spot. There was an uproar among the observing players. He had triggered Black Phantom's secret quest. How did he do it? Was joining Black Phantom all it takes? This mission was actually a chance to trigger a secret quest. Realizing this, the players who were still observing wasted no time in joining Lu Cheng's camp. They were enthusiastic, joining the camp like a refugee tide. The camp was filled with players in an instant. It was overcrowded and jam-packed. The guards were stunned, they were unsure whether to chase people away or not. The players who were done choosing their camps impatiently went to find Han Xiao, wanting to trigger the quest. However, they were faced with rejection. Why can't we? Is it only restricted to the first person who joined the camp? That was the most possible guess. The players who were a step slower wanted to bang their heads on the ground. The pain they felt was as if they were notified of striking a lottery to only be told it was an error. They had the chance of being the first, but this chance was snatched by Bun Hit Dog, just like that. A step slower, a golden opportunity missed. The players were full of regret. Han Xiao brought the overly excited Bun Hit Dog to one side and casually issued 5 reputation points. He secretly planned on how to make full use of Bun Hit Dog. Bringing along a player who was a game video maker also meant that he was bringing a reporter along. He could then have a channel to disseminate news to players freely. He could choose to give players some news selectively based on what information he wanted the players to know. After experiencing the baptism of information explosion, controlling the public's opinion was equivalent to holding a weapon. He was able to defame the opponent, guide the public's opinion, and shape his image to his benefit. Looks like my manipulation is getting more and more high-end. Han Xiao was elated. He compiled an accompanying mission that was generous in rewards and gave it to Bun Hit Dog. Next, he took out a mobile that could be used to contact him and handed it to Bun Hit Dog as well. He urged Bun Hit Dog a million times not to lose it, so Bun Hit Dog nodded repeatedly and gripped the mobile seriously. He had 2 accompanying players, Bun Hit Dog and Frenzied Sword. The limit of Han Xiao's mission was adequate. After advancing the second time, the limit to what he could reward players increased from 300 to 500 per level. This also meant that at LV40, the increment was at around 12,000, but after the advancement, it had doubled to 25,000. Now, the total value had reached up to 50,000. Han Xiao did not think of any news to disseminate, so he first gave Bun Hit Dog his contact as it would inevitably be of use in the future. Now I have 3 players that I fancy, Frenzied Sword, Maple Moon, and Bun Hit Dog. The strength is slightly low, I'd need to expand my support team. Han Xiao was thinking ahead. He would rather focus on quality than quantity, he was destined to walk the elite route. If he was able to take in China's past experts then he would have profited. However, he felt that this possibility was rather uncertain as those ultra-good players all had some strange personalities. Having only gone to 2 novice villages so far, he still had 10 more waiting for him. Thus, Han Xiao had tons of opportunities left to choose his men. Chapter 157, Nemesis. Balsas arrived hastily at the lookout tower and saw a large number of refugees flooding into Lu Cheng's camp. He was flustered. This bunch of refugees are abandoning my town? How did Lu Cheng subdue them? It was at this moment Balsas realized that this special bunch of refugees valued profit over anything. The only reason they were easily manipulated by those small profits was because they had not yet been offered bigger benefits. Balsas thought that he was in control of the refugees, but that was just wishful thinking. I'm doomed. Balsas was frantically running around in circles. These refugees were his trump card against Lu Cheng, and now that Lu Cheng had them, his advantage no longer existed. Suddenly, he felt something was amiss. Lu Cheng should not have known any special aspects of the refugees. At this moment, his assistant ran over panicky and reported the news of Black Phantom helping Lu Cheng. This news was like a thunderbolt hitting him. Balsas was stood motionless in shock. He could not imagine being enemies with Black Phantom as he knew he would die miserably. Every superhuman that died under Black Phantom's gun was a reflection of his own end. Black Phantom was of a legendary rank, why would he help Lu Cheng suddenly? It must be because of Black Phantom that Lu Cheng was able to subdue the refugees. Why does he have so much influence on the refugees? Balsas then recalled that Black Phantom had mentioned he was only passing by. Liar. Balsas had the idea of retreating. If Balsas retreated along with the armed forces, there was a high possibility that Lu Chen would not pursue and attack. The battle hasn't begun, and you're already thinking of running away. Have you forgotten the Alumera family's rules? Xiao Rui arrived at the lookout tower, stood beside Balsas, and frowned. But that's the Black Phantom. Also, half of the refugees have betrayed us. Alumera would never withdraw from a war. Get your men ready for battle. Xiao Rui's voice was firm and full of righteousness. There's the Black Phantom though. My bodyguard, Lu Chen, will prevent him from participating in the battle. Lu Chen, who was standing behind Xiao Rui, stepped out blankly. His calm, confident manner soothed Balsas' nerves. Balsas clenched his teeth and hesitated for a while before making a firm decision and calling his assistant. Mobilize everyone and kick that Black Pine bastard all the way back to his home. We have some of the refugees with us at least, we still have a chance at this battle. Yes sir. The assistant hurried when to convey the order. There were only 3 people left on the lookout tower. Xiao Rui turned his head and said lowly, prepare the vehicle in case the guards fail. We must ensure that we are able to retreat. Don't worry, we are on the same side, the family's side. I'll vouch for you that we had went all out for this arduous battle. Balsas heaved a sigh of relief, having some support steadied his heart. He was afraid Xiao Rui would let this news get to him, but it seemed like he was still rational. Leaving the soldiers of Green Valleyville behind to resist, this would delay Lu Cheng's troops and aid them in escaping, and it would also be easier to account to the Alumera family. In the early hours, the sky was dark, and a thick fog had seeped in. Green Valleyville's guards were waiting atop the wall behind their machine guns in their bunkers. Through the wall fencing, they saw piles of sandbags in position and supporting machine guns. If they broke through the city gates, the battle would begin. They have decided to defend till their death, so a fierce battle is unavoidable. Fortunately, the number of stubborn refugees has decreased greatly. Lu Chen put his binoculars down and let out a sigh. He did not want to massacre the refugees, and Han Xiao had done him a huge favor. Lu Chen was flabbergasted at the fact that Han Xiao seemed to have such influence on the refugees. It only took him half a night to solve this difficult problem. As for the refugees who remained in Green Valleyville, Lu Chen had given them a chance, and there was also a limit to being benevolent. Attack in 20 minutes. Lu Chen gave out a command and took advantage of the time that the troops needed to prepare to find Han Xiao to express his gratitude. It was all thanks to you that we managed to solve the issue of the refugees. Han Xiao smiled in response. There was no free lunch in the world, and the more Han Xiao did not mention a reward, the more Lu Chen felt uneasy. He paused before saying in exasperation, I really feel that there's nothing on me that such a character like you would be interested in. This sentence was caught by Bun Hit Dog, who was standing at the side. He sensed the hidden meaning. This kind of character? Another clue relating to Black Phantom's identity. Bun Hit Dog thought of a vague outline for the first episode. We'll discuss again after the war ended. These refugees will fight for you, Han Xiao replied. The refugees are not soldiers, and I'm not Balsas, I'll not let them throw their lives away. Lu Chen shook his head. Even without your command, they'll still participate in this battle. Han Xiao lowered his voice. Are these people lunatics? Do they not fear death? Lu Chen expressed his suspicions. However, the time for battle was approaching. He had no time to inquire more. He hurriedly went to command his troop. Following the fleet of vehicles, a fierce battle began. Gunfire tore the darkness apart. Lu Cheng's troops launched an intense attack on Green Valleyville. The soldiers based on the wall and the vehicle carrying machine guns and howitzers were shooting across each other, and the battlefield was flooded with the sound of engines, machine guns, and screams of agony. The night sky was illuminated with the blaze of every exploded grenade and pervaded with the smoke from the guns. The players also began their fighting at close quarters. Green Valleyville's players had clear commands from several small guilds leaders. While the players on Lu Cheng's side lacked cohesion, they had a large number of players. Han Xiao observed at one side as the situation did not require him to intervene yet. Lu Cheng had a high chance of winning. Suddenly, a shadow traversed across the battlefield and made a beeline toward Han Xiao along the battlefield's edge. An artillery shell's flame and bullets landed on Han Xiao's body, yet he was not at all injured. Black Phantom, I'll be your opponent. Lu Cheng rushed over with giant strides. I can't even mind my own business now. Han Xiao grudgingly took out and fired a machine gun. 3 bullets hit the space between Lu Cheng's eyebrows, heart, and lower region of his body, but there was no expected blood splattered. The moment when the 3 steel bullets hit Lu Cheng, it seemed that the kinetic energy suddenly disappeared. The bullets bounced off Lu Cheng's skin, and the might was not even as good as a slingshot. Light blue smoke showing the damage dealt could be seen floating above his head. -0. -0. Han Xiao clearly saw the moment when the warhead hit, and the target's skin rippled with fine corrugation. After which, the bullet lost its kinetic energy. His eyes darkened. Kinetic energy absorption? The interface showed Lu Cheng had reached LV-44. The level was not as high as Han Xiao's, but Lu Cheng's ability was very tricky. It was the natural defense against a kinetic energy weapon, and this happened to restrain his machinery. Han Xiao was unlucky. He just had to meet an enemy who was able to restrain him. With kinetic energy absorption, one could dissolve the various power exerted on the body. If the power could not break through the ability's support limit, the power would then be absorbed and transformed into the opponent's power. Using physical property to attack was ineffective toward this kind of ability. To deal with kinetic energy absorption, using either quantity or mental form to attack was the best choice. The support limit of this type of ability naturally depended on the level and strength. Unfortunately, in general, the support limit would always exceed the combat capability of the same level. Lu Cheng stopped a few meters away from Han Xiao and said coldly, "Black Phantom, this battle is unrelated to you. Mind your own business." A legendary killer was eyeing covetously at edge of the battlefield, so Lu Cheng took the lead to prevent the Black Phantom from participating in the battle. Han Xiao's response was simply 2 bullets going for Lu Cheng's eyes, and they had resulted in 0 damage still. The warhead fell to the ground disappointedly. Lu Cheng's eyes did not even blink. He was not harmed at all and said indifferently, "You're Darknet's top killer and the Blood Pack Society's trump card. Others may fear you, but not me. I'll give you a word of advice, stay away from this battlefield." The Darknet? Blood Pack Society? What power is that? The observing Bun Hit Dog had an idea and hastily stored these 2 important keywords in his heart. He was finally seeing the tip of the iceberg of Black Phantom's mysterious origin. Han Xiao's mind quickly filtered through his equipment at hand. Coming up with a preliminary plan, his feet slammed onto the ground and the electromagnetic hover boots lit up. The exerted power made him recoil rapidly. He touched his waist swiftly and pulled out 2 berserk eagles. In a quick move, he changed to a Haim bullet and opened fire. The bullets hit the side of Lu Cheng's feet, and poisonous gas began to rise and pervaded the air. Lu Cheng detected the poisonous gas and frowned. He held his breath and charged in large strides. While he was traversing through the battlefield earlier on, he had absorbed a large amount of kinetic energy from the crossfire. The kinetic energy shot out from the bottom of his feet as he dashed toward Han Xiao. With every step he took, his footprints formed big pits. He was like an unstoppable tank as he caught up with Han Xiao. He gathered an enormous amount of kinetic energy and directed it at Han Xiao's chest. Bang! As if having a head-on collision with a mad rhinoceros, his body flew out uncontrollably. The remaining power was unstoppable, and he even knocked down and killed several players who were so unfortunate to be in his way. Chapter 158, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. This blow made Han Xiao seem pathetic. However, his magnetically controlled retractable armor managed to reduce the impact. Hence, it only took 50 HP. He had close to 3000 HP, which was quite good among the other mechanics of the same rank. The power of Lu Cheng's released kinetic energy was not very strong, but it could easily cause repelling and flying effects, and that was the annoying part. The interface displayed the insidious effect of the poisonous gas. The Haim bullets were effective, but Lu Cheng's HP and resistance were not low too. He could still explode kinetic energy and rapidly get out of the poisonous gas cloud. It was unrealistic to use poisonous gas to deal with Lu Cheng. The effect of using high explosive bullets was slightly better, but they were the same as the Haim bullets, unable to win by just using them. Han Xiao did not give chase as the ammunition he had was limited, and there were only 3 magazines with high explosive bullets left. He took a deep breath to increase his blood oxygen content. He stomped his feet and stopped recoiling from the impact. A deep trail could be seen on the ground. He put both his guns away and put his hands in a stance to ward off the charging Lu Cheng with his iron fists. The kinetic energy of Lu Cheng's iron fists almost smashed open Han Xiao's stance. Lu Cheng's kinetic energy was able to amplify power, and Han Xiao was vulnerable in terms of power. An artillery shell exploded nearby, there was a glare, and both men were intertwined in a fight, one attacking and one guarding. This posture resembled a paper-cut silhouette drawing, disappearing in a flash. Lu Cheng roared and slammed his fists onto Han Xiao's head. The kinetic energy of that action caused a tremor in the air. Han Xiao was beaten to the extent that his head became crooked and his cervical vertebrae cracked bone by bone. He grabbed Lu Cheng's shoulder and refused to let himself fly out because of the impact of that hit. His other hand started the thermoelectrical incisor gloves and aimed it toward Lu Cheng's eyes. High temperature. Lu Cheng quickly raised his head in alert. The glove glided across his cheek and left a burn, exposing his flesh. The burn stung his nerves, and in that moment, Lu Cheng exploded the kinetic energy within his body, causing a tremendous force to push Han Xiao out. Han Xiao panted and removed the mud that was sputtered all over his face. Firearms were useless, and this cost him a chance of surprise kill. In addition, it would only enable the opponent to absorb more kinetic energy. However, he still had other types of weapons such as flames and poisonous gas that both could kill and injure. Fortunately, he is unable to absorb such energy. Otherwise, I really would not know how to subdue him. Lu Cheng covered the burn on his face, glanced fearfully at Han Xiao's gloves, and immediately turned around to run off in another direction. Han Xiao froze, and his expression changed suddenly. He hurriedly gave chase. On a war vehicle, a soldier who was controlling machine guns saw a figure rapidly approaching. He instinctively turned the muzzle around to aim at the figure, and the compressed bullets were hitting the target. However, he was stupefied at the discovery that the target, who should have been shot into a sieve, was unscathed. The warheads dropped onto the ground one by one. "Don't hit him!" Han Xiao yelled. It was a pity that the reminder came too late. The surrounding war vehicles fired at Lu Cheng, who absorbed all the kinetic energy. Both of Lu Cheng's eyes were bloodshot, and the amount of kinetic energy was almost overflowing. Lu Cheng's muscles were twitching like those of an agitated mouse. He turned around, and the ground that he had stepped on exploded into a big hole. His whole body flew as if it was an exploded artillery shell. This was the combined kinetic energy of 1,000 bullets. This speed is too fast for me. Han Xiao's eyes blurred, and he could not avoid it in time. The impact was like hitting a moving train. The scenery in his line of sight fell back quickly, and he resembled a baseball that had been hit for a home run, flying tens of meters. He landed and bounced countless times before falling into a ditch along the sides of the road. His body was covered with mud, and finally, he crashed into a war vehicle, overturning it, before stopping. He felt really dizzy, and his whole body ached. Magnetically controlled retractable armor's durability dropped by 132 points. You received 241 points of damage. The enemy knew how to bring out the advantage of his ability, which in turn made Han Xiao suffer a small loss. Lu Cheng. I did not hear of his name in my previous life. To think he would be so troublesome to deal with. Ah, he is a crouching tiger, a hidden dragon, I mustn't underestimate him. Han Xiao's eyes turned cold as he entered into combat concentration mode, spat out a mouthful of blood, and leaped up once again to fight Lu Cheng. Enveloped in the flames of war, the two fought fiercely on the battlefield. Bullets whistled past the airs, and flames illuminated the horizon again and again. The area around the two became free of bullets. Soldiers dare not attack Lu Cheng again, but Lu Cheng could always knock himself against the gun muzzle. This battle is greatly disadvantageous for me. Han Xiao's eyes flashed. He abandoned Lu Cheng and rushed toward Green Valleyville. Just like a shadow, he disappeared in a flash. Avoiding the firing by Green Valleyville's guards, Han Xiao glided up the wall with a few steps, opened fire with both of his guns, and killed the guards wantonly. Bullets penetrated each and every person, and blood was splattered everywhere. Lu Cheng was alarmed and hastily pursued him. Green Valleyville was the fundamental point of conflict. Han Xiao had understood this point and immediately adopted the tactic of avoiding the enemy's strength and attacking his weakness. Hence, he did not continue to fight Lu Cheng painstakingly. Unless Lu Cheng did not want this town, Han Xiao would only be led by his nose. In the moments between his fight with Lu Cheng, Han Xiao thought of a strategy. After changing the magazine, he shot down a few more guards. There was suddenly a huge gust of wind behind him, and Han Xiao twisted his body to avoid it. Lu Cheng swept past a few inches away. Having missed the opportunity, He punched the wall and smashed a huge piece off it. Broken bricks and stones spilled over the ground. Lu Cheng's body became sluggish, as if he had fully exhausted his kinetic energy. Here's my chance. Both of Han Xiao's hands aimed at Lu Cheng's head, the high heat from the thermoelectrical incisor gloves warping the air. Lu Cheng did not show any signs of being flustered. Instead, there was a glimpse of accomplishment. You got tricked. The strong kinetic energy was surging again, and there were no signs of exhaustion. That was just a feint. This was a long-awaited killing strike that contained 80% of his kinetic energy. He soared, and with amazing swiftness, he lifted his knee to knock onto Han Xiao's chin. Once hit, the impact would smash half of Han Xiao's face and fracture it. Han Xiao flew off the wall with his head tilted up. That didn't feel right. Lu Cheng was shocked. His knees did not have the feeling of striking a concrete object. Han Xiao had been vigilant. Just now, in the flash of light, he had used the electromagnetic hover boots to retreat. He was only gently scratched by Lu Cheng's knee, and he was hardly injured. While he was in midair, he withdrew his berserk eagles, aimed at Lu Cheng's eyes, and opened fire. This attack was fruitless. Lu Cheng went stiff for a moment. He could not escape, yet his face did not change. He knew this bullet was ineffective against his ability. Bang! When the bullet was about to hit his eyes, the bullet lost its kinetic energy as usual. However, the warhead suddenly burst out a dazzling glare. Lu Cheng covered his eyes and let out a blood-curdling scream. His vision was a vast expanse of whiteness. The stinging pain in his two eyes affected his brain's sense of equilibrium. Flash bullet. Oh, the thought of it taking effect right on his eyes, what a sweet feeling. Han Xiao had been mulling over this attack for a long time. Han Xiao's hand reached out, and with the help of the wall's chink, he climbed up the wall once again. Taking advantage of Lu Cheng losing his vision, this was the best timing to launch Overload and Flaming Will. Han Xiao's hand suddenly pressed on Lu Cheng's face. This time around, the attack was definitely the best. Even if Flaming Will only burnt his face black as before, the total damage accumulated would still be off the charts. -423. -423. The damage might have seemed worse than the sniper rifle, but the thermoelectrical incisor gloves relied mainly on continuous damages. It was already considered formidable for a sudden explosive force that was able to reach this level. Lu Cheng was not like Han Xiao, his HP was only around 2000. It easily reduced to 80% in just a short while, and the damage was still flooding the interface. The burning smell was pervasive. Lu Cheng yelled bitterly and got up. He hurriedly exploded his kinetic energy and pushed Han Xiao away. Lu Cheng's face was severely burned and beyond recognition. His face was a mix of burnt flesh and red blood. Lu Cheng's eyesight was damaged, and the light and shadow in his vision was distorted. He could barely identify a direction as he fled, staggering, with his teeth tightly clenched. Han Xiao promptly gave chase, and Lu Cheng's heart sank. He was hoping that Black Phantom would attend to the battle and not chase after him. Fleeing was hopeless, he knew that he would not be able to escape death. He fulfilled his last duty as a bodyguard by holding up Han Xiao. If Lu Cheng died, the Alumara family would surely take good care of his family. The two of them were soon a distance away from the battlefield, and they pursued each other into the woods. Chapter 159, Family. About 10 minutes later, Lu Cheng slowed down and fell to the ground. He had depleted his accumulated kinetic energy. He turned and realized that Han Xiao was following behind like a demon. Kill me. The burn on Lu Cheng's face was a tragic sight as he gave a pained smile. I don't need you to tell me that. Han Xiao's face was apathetic. He opened wide his palms and grabbed Lu Cheng's head, his fingers penetrating his skull. He only let out a turbid breath when Lu Cheng finally stopped breathing. He was a formidable opponent, almost causing me to suffer a defeat. He took one last look at Lu Cheng's corpse and activated a high-explosive bullet to protect his body from scavengers. After which, he followed the sound of gunfire and returned to Green Valleyville's battlefield. The battle was even more intense. Green Valleyville's gates had been blown up, the armed tanks were hurtling past the streets, and machine guns were exchanging fire. Green Valleyville's residents had secured their doors and windows, covered their ears, and were trembling in their houses. Lu Cheng's troops were conscious of the ordinary residents and had avoided them. Since Lu Cheng had dragged him into the battle, Han Xiao decided to get the battle over quickly. Han Xiao set off to find Green Valleyville's commander. He searched for the person giving commands, but he soon realized that no one was giving any commands. There were vehicle trails on the ground on the far end of Green Valleyville that hinted to the whereabouts of Balsas and Xiaorui. They've escaped? The off-road vehicle traveled along in the gloomy forest, and the sound of gunfire in Green Valleyville gradually became dimmer. Xiaorui, who was in the back seat, could see the flames behind him peeking through the trees. Lu Cheng has died. Xiaorui clenched his fists and pressed them on his knees. He could barely restrain his trembling. Lu Cheng had served the family for 10 over years. He was loyal and devoted. Furthermore, he was the best fighter among the family's ranks. He had many stunning military accomplishments. Xiaorui had always considered him a strong supporter to think that he would die at the hands of Black Phantom. Xiaorui originally thought that even if Lu Cheng were unable to stall Black Phantom, he would still be able to retreat. However, even though he did not manage to catch Lu Cheng's last words in the earphones when Lu Cheng was escaping, he knew his supporter was dying. Balsas and 4 other armed bodyguards were in the vehicle. Balsas was looking rather nervous. Black Phantom is a monster. I told you earlier not to provoke him. You just refused to listen. Balsas was sweating profusely. Xiaorui's complexion was ashen. Don't talk rubbish, at least we've escaped. He won't catch up with us, right? Balsas repeatedly looked at the rear-view mirror, his heart pounding. Xiaorui gulped. Lu Cheng is currently attacking Green Valleyville, and the guards in the towns will help us stall the enemy. He won't have time to chase and kill us. He had just finished speaking when a ghost-like figure appeared in the rear-view mirror, tailing the vehicle like a shadow. Everyone in the vehicle was so shocked that they screamed. He's here. Go faster. Accelerate all the way, and don't let up. Everyone in the vehicle was panicking. The off-road vehicle resembled a runaway stray dog, frantically speeding up. They managed to shake off Han Xiao for a moment, but this was not the time to feel relieved. The vehicle somewhat slowed down, and the black-colored ghost, relentlessly hostile and bearing the tenacity of a mad demon, hovered as he sped just above the ground and appeared in the rear-view mirror once again, with inevitability, like a pressing king of hell. Like the merciless phantom that he was. Everyone's adrenaline soared, their hearts practically jumping out of their throats. They were so nervous to the point where their bodies went stiff all over. The horror movie-like atmosphere finally triggered the driver to make a mistake. In the state of panic, the vehicle rolled down the slope and fell to the bottom. Xiaorui's head was spinning as he struggled to climb out of the window. Suddenly, a pair of boots that flickered with blue lights appeared in his vision. He looked up and saw Black Phantom towering over him, looking at him indifferently. Don't kill me. Bang. 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 The gunshots sounded repeatedly. Xiaorui was so frightened that he shut his eyes and discovered that there was no pain. He opened his eyes and realized that the 4 bodyguards had all been shot and killed, only Balsas and himself were left. Xiaorui shivered. He knew that he had to remain calm in this situation. However, his fear of death made it impossible for him to calm down. His frightened emotions were like tides, flooding his heart again and again, so much so that he did not dare look directly into Han Xiao's eyes. Black Phantom, spare my life. I can give you tremendous returns. Han Xiao's eyebrow jumped. The reason he had kept Xiaorui was because Xiaorui was sandwiched between the bodyguards. Hence, he reckoned that he was an important character. Balsas regretted having a conflict with Black Phantom but regretted listening to Xiaorui's opinion more so. He raised his head and looked straight in Han Xiao's eyes. You're a liar, you had already united with Lu Cheng. You absolutely were not just passing by. Whatever Black Phantom had said that he was not interested in looking for trouble was all a lie. Han Xiao stroked his gun and chuckled. If I said this was a coincidence, would you believe it? Landing in your hands this way, I already know that I have no chance to live. Kill me, please, I beg that you just make it quick. Balsas suddenly grew a backbone and shook off Xiaorui's hand, which was pulling at his shirt's hem anxiously. I don't know if you're really asking for death or deliberately displaying your strong will, but as you wish. Bang. The bullet penetrated Balsas' temple. He fell, and the pool of blood gradually expanded. Han Xiao's eyebrows shot up. It looked like Balsas was not pretending, he really had given up all hope and wished for a quick death. For this type of warlord who operated outside the city, even if he was usually afraid of death, when he was truly confronted with it, he would accept it calmly. There was someone, on the other hand, who was way weaker. Han Xiao looked over and Xiao Rui was so terrified that he did not dare breathe. His face was pale, and his back was drenched in cold sweat. Han Xiao squatted and used the gun barrel to tap on Xiao Rui's face. "You don't wish to die?" Xiao Rui frantically shook his head. "Give me a reason. I can give you a lot of money. I can refer you to the Alumera family. Do I look like someone who needs that?" Han Xiao pointed the muzzle at himself. Xiao Rui swallowed his saliva in alarm as he racked his brains and pondered if there was anything that could move Han Xiao. Han Xiao's eyes were sharp, and he suddenly caught a glimpse of Xiao Rui's full and bulging pocket. He reached out and fished out a stack of bounty slip. It turned out to be a wanted poster for Zero Him. "Why is this Alumera man carrying with him my bounty slip?" Han Xiao raised his eyebrows, played with the paper in his hands, and stared at Xiao Rui silently. Xiao Rui finally saw something that aroused his interest. Xiao Rui immediately felt refreshed and hurriedly spilled everything he knew frankly. Han Xiao. Zero. Alumera family. After hearing the information, Han Xiao stiffened. He did not know that his original self came from the Alumera family. "You didn't lie to me, right?" Xiao Rui shook his head repeatedly. Black Phantom appeared to be interested in Zero. He did not care about the reason, all he knew was he now had a chance of survival. Hence, he did not dare conceal anything and struggled to take out a computer in the vehicle to pull up several photos. The photos showed Han Xiao's younger self before he was taken away by the Germinal organization. There was concrete proof in all kinds of photos from the Alumera family. Han Xiao did not doubt his identity. "So, this means I have a stepfather and a bunch of brothers and sisters?" Han Xiao's feelings were complicated. He had always thought that he had not a worry or a concern in this world. He did not expect to have these connections. Alumera was his family. Han Xiao took one look at Xiao Rui. "This person is my family, too. Alumera family, the North Continent's biggest warlord. The second leader in command, Xiao Jin, was my original body's biological father. Their family was considered powerful." Han Xiao pondered in silence. Xiao Rui's heart was nearly at his throat. He felt like he was a convict waiting for his sentence. This was the longest 1 minute of his life. "You can leave," Han Xiao faintly said. Xiao Rui did not dare to believe it. He stood up, trembling, and ran 2 steps away in the opposite direction. He turned his head and saw an aloof Han Xiao. Only then was he ecstatic. His life was saved. He did not carry any thoughts of revenge. He did not want to have any further interactions with Black Phantom at all. He stretched his legs and ran for his life. Suddenly, there was a sharp pain at the back of his head. Xiao Rui lost his control of his body. He fell with his face down, resembling a dog eating its poop. His pupils dilated, and his face looked bewildered. "What happened to me? So cold." This was Xiao Rui's last thought in this world. There was a deep bullet hole in the back of Xiao Rui's head, and blood was spilling out. Han Xiao put the berserk eagle back in his holster, his face emotionless. After thinking for a bit, he had still decided to kill Xiao Rui. Alumera was the connections that Han Xiao's original self had, but that unfortunate man had already died. Han Xiao was Han Xiao, not another person. Even if the old Han Xiao had remaining blood relations, Han Xiao would not treat the Alumera family as his family. Anyway, the old Han Xiao had been killed by his big brother. He would not inherit the relationships that the old Han Xiao had. To him, the Alumera family was a bunch of strangers, and it was none of his concern. "I'll kill when there's a need to." Perhaps Han Xiao could get some support from the Alumera family by using his original identity, but with his current position, he did not need to yield and rely on this kind of power. The most important point was that he did not wish to do it this way. "My family is not in this world." He lit the corpse on fire, turned around, and left. The blazing flame pulled his silent shadow longer and longer. Chapter 160, Xiao Jin. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. In the headquarters of the Alumera family, Green Valleyville on the South Continent was ambushed. "We have lost that territory. The last message from them was an hour ago. Lu Chen died in the battle. Balsas and Xiao Rui have retreated as well. No news has been heard from them yet. I think they may be in trouble." The exquisite crystal wine glass was smashed to the ground, and red wine splattered onto the expensive handmade Ordina carpet, leaving trails of red roses. Daryl, the leader of the family, was breathing noisily as though he was a bear. His body was bulky like a bear, too, hence his nickname the Alumera White Bear. This was Daryl's study. He was rather violent by nature. His bookshelf was not for books but for displaying all kinds of guns. Firearms, ammunition, daggers, swords, his miniature arsenal collection. Who attacked our people? Daryl snarled. In front of the desk was a well-dressed, middle-aged man. He was wearing something similar to a suit, but with minor differences in some places. It was way more refined and exquisite. He was wearing a gold-rimmed glasses, and the gold-plated chains of the glasses hanged on his ear. If one overlooked the muscle under his clothes, this person was an archetypal scholar. He was Alumera's second in command, Xiaojin. Xiaojin held the tablet with one hand and said, "There are two of them. One is the big warlord of South Continent, Lu Chang. I have heard of his name. Gather the armed men in South Continent. An eye for an eye. Alumera will seek this revenge." Daryl patted the table and asked, "Who might the other person be?" "He's the assassin from the dark net, Black Phantom. Bring him too." As he said these three words, Daryl's tone changed and came to his senses. "How did we end up provoking him?" Daryl was very wary about Black Phantom, a legendary killer. He knew it was best not to provoke lone rangers like him. While the Alumera family was big, they were most fearful of legendary killers like him. If he wanted to start a mad killing spree to assassinate the middle class of the Alumera family, it would be impossible to stop him. Although Daryl was impulsive by nature, he knew who not to provoke. Dealing with Lu Cheng was an effortless decision. Lu Cheng's forces were entangled in South Continent, and he was not going to affect the Alumera's influence in the north. Black Phantom, on the other hand, was different. He was a lone ranger who could travel up to the north. He had even slain Lu Cheng. Whether the Alumera family's top forces could even hurt the Black Phantom was still a question in doubt. Furthermore, Black Phantom's movements were erratic. There were not many reports on him through the intelligence network, and without an expansive intelligence network, they could not track him down. In addition, the organization he belonged to was in fact the world's largest intelligence network. If they wanted to target someone from the Darknet organization and requested help from the Darknet itself, it would be ridiculous. Daryl was 80% sure he would be called a fool. Therefore, becoming enemies with the Black Phantom was certainly an unwise decision. Daryl could only suppress his anger and find other excuses. Investigate the reason the Black Phantom is intervening. Don't provoke him just yet. Xiaojin agreed with an expressionless face. It was hard to know what he was thinking about. Daryl had always been an impatient man, and now that he was frustrated. He pointed to Xiaojin's face and ordered, "Go deal with your son's business. The war is coming. I don't wish to deal with any sort of Germinal's business at this time." Xiaojin adjusted his glasses and said, "He's my son. Once I find him, he will come back obediently." Day was about to break, and the gunfire in Green Valleyville was finally coming to an end. The remaining enemies had all been killed. When Lu Cheng had conquered Green Valleyville, he ordered his troops to clear the battlefield and restrain them from harming any residents. The worried residents who could not sleep for the entire night rushed to the streets and listened to the new master of the town, Lu Cheng, in the square. He promised to safeguard the residents' lives and property. For the Green Valleyville invasion task, players who had chosen to protect the camp had all failed and were feeling dejected. The battle last night had been very intense, and many players wished it had been longer. Han Xiao also gained some experience from the task. He held his arm and leaned against a house to wait for Lu Cheng to complete his speech. He had Frenzied Sword and Bun Hit Dog by his side. Frenzied Sword was in bad mood as he was not able to keep Han Xiao to himself now. He was upset. Bun Hit Dog went over to Frenzied Sword and said, "I know you. You were featured on Galaxy Times. You are a professional gamer." "Oh." Frenzied Sword reacted coldly. "Have you always been following Black Phantom?" Bun Hit Dog was curious. Frenzied Sword did not want to bother with Bun Hit Dog, but as a professional player, he had to take note of his image, and he should not be too cold. He nodded. "Do you know his origins?" "His real name is Han Xiao," Frenzied Sword replied. He came to realization immediately and turned around to see if Han Xiao had heard him. He relaxed. "He used to serve Star Dragon. I'm not very sure about the exact details, but I do know that he is acquainted with someone in the camp called Stardragon Strategic Defense Department. Bun Hit Dog's eyes lit up. The video he wanted to make would be an investigation about Black Phantom's origin. Frenzied Sword had been his longest follower. He was likely to know things that others did not. He was impressed. He said in a light-hearted manner, "Let me introduce myself. I am a game video producer." Frenzied Sword stared blankly. He only recalled now that Bun Hit Dog's ID was rather familiar. He was the producer of the series XX Adventure Diaries. When he was playing Night in the past, he had come across Bun Hit Dog's Night Adventure Diaries as well. He was a small yet famous video maker. "It's you." Frenzied Sword collected himself up. When he received Bun Hit Dog's friend request, he immediately accepted it. Only status and fame would bring one recognition. If he was a plain and dull player, Frenzied Sword would not even have bothered. Things were different when one was famous. "I'm preparing to focus on Galaxy and start a series. I'm intending to place Black Phantom as my focus in my first episode. I would like to know more about this person's origins. I hope you can provide me with some material. You could appear on screen together with me to do a series as well." Han Xiao never talked about his origins, so Bun Hit Dog decided to change his focus onto Frenzied Sword. "All right, sure," Frenzied Sword replied. This was a win-win situation. A professional gamer appearing on the program was bound to rise in reputation. This would be good exposure for him. Listening to the two discussing behind him, Han Xiao did not stop them. Frenzied Sword had limited knowledge about him. Such information could be disclosed and made known, and this would only make more players curious. He wanted to reveal the information bit by bit. This was precisely his intention in bringing Bun Hit Dog along. After assuring the residents of Green Valleyville, Lu Cheng handed over the affairs to the deputy and went to Han Xiao's side. "Black Phantom, thank you for your aid. If not for you, I would not have conquered Green Valleyville. If only Balsas didn't escape. Oh, I killed him." Lu Cheng's face went blank, and he felt a tight squeeze on his heart. "I am very grateful, but do you really not want anything?" Han Xiao chuckled a little and changed the topic. "Have you discovered the unique aspects of the refugees?" Upon mentioning this, Lu Cheng was delighted. This group of refugees can all die and then resurrect. It's simply amazing. I thought they were simple ordinary people. This world is so big, and it seems like nothing is impossible. Lu Cheng originally did not plan for the refugees to join the battle. But as the players took action, he soon realized that they had the special ability to resurrect. He was shocked, and he figured out what Han Xiao had originally meant. These helpers were just too special. He had looked down on them. Now he knew why they were not afraid to die. That was because they simply just do not die. Bun Hit Dog, who was by the side, felt that something was strange. Refugees. Are they actual players? Why would the NPC think that the players resurrecting is strange? Won't an NPC not be bothered with that? Han Xiao pulled Lu Cheng to the side. He did not want other players to hear what he was going to tell Lu Cheng. "Black Phantom, do you know the origin of these refugees?" Lu Cheng curiously asked. "I'm not too sure," Han Xiao replied, "but I do know that they are very diligent. They are extremely profit-driven. Didn't you destroy Green Valleyville? You need these people to rebuild the place. These refugees are the best laborers you can find. You can use them to your liking. But some refugees were against me before. They are my enemies. Their assistance to Balsas was not a loyal and faithful one. You can treat them as mercenaries." When he said this, Lu Cheng understood it. "I can try. You really don't know what happened to them. They can all resurrect, is it just their special ability? We don't know where Balsas found this group of people.